Hey, I'm Marie.
And I'm Nicolina.
And we're the hosts of Paranormal Podcast. If you want to feel like you're at a slumber party with your best friends telling everyone creepy stories, listen and subscribe to us at Apple Podcasts and on Spotify.
That's paranormal. The normal is in brackets.
Stay spooky.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to Creep It Real. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Bianca.
Thank you for listening to Creep It Real.
Today we are collaborating with our friends over at
Kim and Ket, Stay Alive, Maybe.
They are a horror movie comedy duo, female duo, who watch horror movies and they play like a fun little game where
Whoever has not watched the movie is kind of playing a game to see who's going to be alive at the end.
and if they can also stay alive by making choices that the main character probably wouldn't make.
It's like kind of a spin on a choose your own adventure.
Yes.
And if you enjoy us and our morbid sense of humor, or you can relate to our candid fury at the world, then I think you too would enjoy Kim and Ket. And so you should check out their podcast.
Oh yeah, I really love them. They're hilarious and they're so relatable. We are presenting to you the true story behind the 1999 movie Ravenous. Go check out their show as well if you would like a synopsis of the film. They're a ton of fun and they really are the sweetest sweeties ever. And honestly, this was meant to be done hand in hand with one another. So it's kind of cool to hear them talk about it and see the film through each other's eyes.
And at the end of our episode, we're going to be talking with them about the movie and the story that we looked into.
Oh, and also we're unintentionally keeping yet another couple of themes going, which is cannibalism and the Civil War era.
Unintentionally,
Again,
I'm pretty sure.
It is totally unintentional.
A synchronicity.
Today we are talking about the Colorado cannibal, Alfred Packer. We used the book Man-Eater by Harold Schechter and, of course, various other resources online, which will, of course, again be included within the show notes.
The book was really good. Harold Schechter is a great writer, but he also is very flowery with his writing.
The thing about Harold Schechter's book is that he's not writing for... when I was reading it, it was like, man, he's got so much extra stuff in here, but I'm like, well, of course he does. He's a writer. He's not writing for a podcast.
Right.
Which is why we read it and then condense it.
Right. But we are going to go into a little bit of the backstory of the Americas and just a few other things that we'll talk to you about right now. So let's just get into it, shall we? In 1620, when the Scrooby congregation, better known to us as the Mayflower Pilgrims, departed for the long, arduous journey across the vast ocean to New England, they knew they had a very hard time ahead of them. And if they happened to survive the journey on sea, a whole new set of trials awaited them on dry land. As their chronicler, William Bradford, wrote, once on land, they would be in continual danger of the, quote, savage people who are cruel, barbarous, and most treacherous, being most furious in their rage, being content not only to kill, but delight to torment men in the most bloody manner they may be, flaying some alive, cutting off the members and the joints of others by piecemeal, broiling it on coals, eat the collops of their flesh in their sight whilst they live. So basically, he was like, warning everyone going to the New World.
There are terrible, terrible people there.
There are savages that are going to eat you while you're still alive. Which was obviously some racist bullshit, but stoked fears of the white men to be sure. Ever since that asshole Columbus did nothing of note, Europeans thought America to be the home of cannibals. In fact, it was through that stupid dickhead that the word cannibal entered the English language to begin with. As he was wont to do, Columbus confused the inhabitants of the West Indies, the Caribs, mistakenly recording them as the cannibs.
Oh, what an idiot.
Soon the Spanish word
Cannibales.
There you go. Obviously, cannibals in its anglicized form had become synonymous with the man-eating, quote-unquote, savages of the New World. It's entirely uncertain whether the Carib even partook in anthropophagy, the technical term for man-eating, and it remains a matter of dispute amongst scholars. That said, some tribes, such as Iroquois, did subject their male prisoners to terrible tortures, biting or chopping off their fingers, having their bodies flayed and genitals scorched with red-hot coals. Sounds like fun. I know some people that would find that to be a fun activity. And they were generally burned to death after disembowelment, with some parts of their body eaten and blood drunk in celebration. Additionally, the Anasazi, the ancestors of today's Pueblo Indians, routinely dined on human meat, or man-corn, as they called it. But all Bradford's foreboding proved to be nothing more than scare tactics, as everyone knows by now that the native inhabitants of the New World came to those annoying Puritans' aid, teaching them how to hunt, fish, and grow crops.
Not only that, the native inhabitants of the New World are pretty peaceful.
Pretty much.
I mean,
pretty much.
They worship Mother Nature.
Right.
Like, it sounds like propaganda for something, for what people don't understand or know.
Yes, it's
100%. Of course it is. Yes. Right.
The situation of the Puritans, however, was far different for the Puritans' English predecessors, who 13 years prior had established the Jamestown settlement in Virginia, and whose initial friendly relationship with the surrounding tribes quickly turned hostile, and by 1609, any man that ventured outside the settlement was likely to be taken captive, as a little bit of a contradiction to what you just said.
Right.
During the brutal winter of 1609-1610, the Jamestown colonists found themselves facing starvation and were forced to consume their horses and other beasts, and once those ran out, they began to eat vermin, cats, and dogs. They were going mad with hunger, and so they resorted to truly horrifying and hard-to-believe measures, like digging up dead corpses to eat them, while some even licked up blood that had spilled from other injured settlers, which sounds delightful. One man later burned for his crimes when he murdered his pregnant wife, then ripped the child out of the womb and chopped the mother into pieces and salted her for food. So, obviously, this is dire. This is a
very dire circumstance.
You're getting crazy out there.
Oh my God.
When finally the supply ship arrived, the population of Jamestown had been reduced from 500 men, women, and children to 64 emaciated survivors. Why do I bring this up, you ask? Well, the summer of 2012, 400 years after the Jamestown colonists suffered through this terrible time, scientists made a grim discovery at the site of the settlement. They were excavating a trash pit containing bones of dogs, cats, and horses, among other animals, when they discovered skeletal fragments of a human being. Through forensic analysis, the investigators determined that the remains were female, roughly 14 years old, based on the development of the molars, and of British ancestry, either the maidservant or child of a gentleman, and that there were telltale cut marks on the skull and shin bones that made it very clear that the girl had been butchered for food. At a press conference held at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., physical anthropologist Douglas Owsley said that the chops to the forehead are very tentative, very incomplete. Then the body was turned over, and there were 4 strikes to the back of the head, none of which was the strongest, and split the skull in half. A penetrating wound was then made to the left temple, probably by a single-sided knife, which was used to pry open the head and remove the brain. To him, it seemed likely that the brain was eaten first due to the fact that it decomposes so quickly following death, followed by her tongue, cheeks, and leg muscles. And so, while the Jamestown settlers and pilgrims all left England with their heads filled with stories about New World savages and their penchant for cannibalism, in the end, it was those settlers themselves who resorted to eating their fellow humans.
How weird.
The starting point for the hypocritical, racist white man who believes he can do no wrong, I think, perhaps. A tradition that has sadly carried on well past its prime to this day, in case you haven't watched anything at all lately. And so American savagery is essentially our oldest pastime. When people talk about the good old days, perhaps they are referencing one single month in 1883 where an Iowa man recently separated from his wife snuck into her bedroom and choked, kicked, and slashed her to death, leaving her in a perfect mass of blood. And a Georgia man drunkenly emptied a shovel of hot coals on his infant child, burning it to death. Then yet another Iowa man, Cody, what's going on there, hacked his 2 young sons to death while they were working in the barn, then murdered his wife with the same weapon while she stood by the stove making breakfast. Next, attempting to murder his 2 daughters before slashing his own throat with a butcher's knife. Another man shot and killed a woman he was having an affair with in Missouri, while a lady this time in Vermont was hanged for the murder of her 8-year-old niece, a crime that was described as so heartless and brutal that not a spark of sympathy was felt for her.
Of course not.
So, there are many more senseless and brutal murders that took place that month, but all of them paled in comparison to the news of Alfred Packer, described as the fiend who deliberately fell upon and butchered his 5 companions and for several weeks lived on the flesh cut from their bones.
Alfred Packer was known as one of only 2 Americans who was ever imprisoned for cannibalism, the other being the infamous Albert Fish.
Old needle balls.
Oh my god. Alfred allegedly killed the other 5 members of his prospecting party when they got stranded in the Rocky Mountains for the winter. He then proceeded to eat them to keep himself alive.
As you do as a frontiersman.
He was born on November 21st of 1842, and he was one of 8 children to James Packer and Esther Greiner. Alfred, however, claimed that his birthday was, in fact, on January 21st, which I don't know why, but he did it.
He just has he has a penchant for just telling lies that don't even matter. Yeah.
Yes. He also falsely claimed to be closely related to Asa Packer.
I think it's Asa.
Asa Packer, who was Pennsylvania's most prominent citizen, being a railroad pioneer and the founder of Lehigh University.
And I think I only know that because I think that was somebody's name on Young and the Restless or something, to be frank with you.
I've got a story about Young and the Restless for you. Yeah.
What do you mean?
We'll do a creeping up on it.
Okay.
In the 1850s, James Packer moved the family to LaGrange County, Indiana, where he worked as a cabinet maker and became an active member of the Methodist Episcopal Society. Society.
Okay.
Although not much is known about Alfred Packer's childhood, he was said to have had a bitter relationship with his parents and moved in his late teens to Minnesota, where he worked as a shoemaker.
We don't claim him.
Shouts Minnesota. We don't claim him because we're not from here.
I know.
Because in his adolescence, he was apprenticed to a shoemaker. For his life, Alfred suffered from epilepsy, which historians speculate may have been a link to insanity.
You know what else is a link? Perhaps that I've discovered while reading this book?
Lead paint.
Yes, fucking lead. Lead poisoning.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and like in the when he was mining and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The copper. Yep.
Oh my god.
Wait. Hold on. I'm going to get into it.
Okay.
At about 18 years old, almost 19, the American Civil War started, and a year later, in April of 1862, he signed for his first enlistment in Winona, Minnesota, as a part of the infantry. I know.
That's a bit of a tongue twister.
It was. It was a mouthful.
And you did it, and then I interrupted you, so that's good.
As a part of the infantry under a 3-year enlistment. He spent the summer in Camp Thomas, which was a Union training base for new recruits. After his arrival, he got a tattoo saying, Alfred Packer, 2nd Battalion, 16th Infantry.
Alferd, by the way, everyone.
Yes.
ERD.
So he was illiterate.
Okay.
Alfred, and he always signed his name Alferd, Alferd. And his sister Melissa also did the same thing, but he eventually spelled it in the what is correct way. I don't know if that matters, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Anyways, after his training, his regiment made their way to Camp Douglas, south of Chicago, which was a training facility for Union soldiers. Later, Camp Douglas became a prisoner of war camp that was so terrible, it was overcrowded, disease ran rampant, that Confederate inmates called it 80 acres of hell. In fact, Alfred attributed the later terrible conditions of the camp to him contracting typhoid fever, which led to his epilepsy while he was applying for disability. He had claimed that he was performing constant, prolonged, and unnecessary guard duty, and this is what caused his epileptic seizures to occur.
Okay.
Again, a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after Christmas of 1862, he was honorably discharged at Fort Ontario in New York because of his epilepsy. And his official certificate stated that he was incapable of performing the duties of a soldier because of this case. And in the space where the physician was supposed to say how many days he had been unfit, the doctor wrote all the time. So he's real specific about it.
I'm unfit all the time.
Same.
Me, you, and Alferd.
Alferd. Naturally, the military wasn't a good fit for him as he had a medical condition, so he did what you should do and he enlisted again.
Oh.
His second enlistment was in the 8th Iowa Cavalry Regiment at Autumna in Iowa. So I was just wondering, do you think, like, for his tattoo that he had, he, like, crossed it out and rewrote that he was in the 8th Cavalry in Iowa, or, like, because of the battalion thing?
Every day with a marker? Do they have markers back in the 1800s?
Anyway, so Packer, again, made up a lie and said that he spent time as a scout for George Custer, of course, for which no evidence actually exists. His new regiment was sent to Tennessee in defense of Nashville, and it was during this period that there was documented evidence of predatory behavior in Alfred.
Oh.
The regimental scribe wrote in this document that he'd had $2.50 or $50 today docked for plundering citizens of Nashville.
Robbing people?
I guess.
Wow.
Then in the following April, while the regiment was still in Nashville, his epilepsy permanently ended his military service. The surgeon wrote on his discharge paperwork, "The paroxysms occur once every 48 hours, and sometimes as often as 2 and 3 times every 48 hours.
Yikes.
So he was discharged again.
He needs some medical marijuana.
Oh my God, yes. He served both of his enlistments for less than a year each because his epileptic fits occurred at least once every couple of days, if not more. The decade after the war, he spent as a drifter, working as a maker and saddler, trapper, teamster, hunter, and wilderness guide. But like with his enlistment, he eventually lost his jobs due to his condition.
It kind of sounds like Jordan Fox, except he didn't lose his jobs due to epilepsy. It's just that he quit them.
It's just that he got bored, which I'm like, how can I work a job for 30 years? I can't.
If it's podcasting, I guess.
I mean, that's the only thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the 1860s, of course, as every other young Army vet did, he was enraptured by the prospect of the gold rush, and he made his way west. In 1871, in Utah, in Bingham County, he was a copper miner, and he got sick with lead poisoning.
Lead poisoning!
And he moved to Sandy, which was a tiny town 12 miles south of Salt Lake City, and worked in a small smelter just outside of town. Not long after, he got lead poisoning again. He later said that the illness, quote, throwed me into fits. They thought I was going to die. After being treated by Dr. McCann with what is described as liberal doses of castor oil.
Like, I don't know. Why would that?
I don't know why castor oil.
I mean, maybe it
binds the eyebrows.
Maybe it binds to something in the body. And
maybe
takes it out of you or something. I have no idea.
In the fall of 1873, he recovered, and it was during this time that the news spread the word of silver strikes in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado.
I gotta say, like, at least he's just traveling around to all the most beautiful states in the Union.
I gotta say, Colorado, when I was driving from California up here, was the most, even though I got stuck in a snowstorm and drifted across the entire highway,
yeah,
was the most beautiful state I got to.
I think it might be my dream state.
Honestly, like, Utah was gorgeous. Nevada was California's but, and then Nebraska and Iowa were like, but Colorado, absolutely stunning. Colorado means colored, like colorful in Spanish. So, but seriously, the colors.
Oh yeah, I freaking love that place. I will one day live near Aspen or something.
Gorgeous. Dang, girl, near Aspen?
Yeah.
Damn, you are bougie. Look at you.
No, bougie would be Boulder, dude.
Oh, I thought Aspen was like the place to be.
Well, I think that the most expensive town or city in Colorado to live is Boulder.
Well,
I looked it up because I at one point was like very dead set on moving
On
there.
Colorado.
And I'm still pretty set on it at one point.
Dude, I'd be down for Colorado. They're super progressive.
Yeah. And look, I can walk down the street and get me my beautiful, beautiful medical marijuanas.
Multiple.
Yeah.
So it was here in Bingham Canyon, Utah, that Alfred Packer met with another fortune hunter, Bob McGrew. Bob had come from Oregon with his partner, George Tracy. He owned 2 wagons, each drawn by a pair of 4-horse teams, and he was making a meager living hauling freight. He later said times were dull, not much to do, and winter coming on. Any place that showed a chance to make some money would do me. When Alfred met him, he told Bob he wanted to go to San Juan country, but that he was broke and he had no way to pay his passage. But he had lived in Colorado and would be useful as a guide. Bob, described Alfred as having seemingly robust health, and although he was generally quiet and reticent, he loved to go among the Mormons and argue religion with them.
Okay. Also, I find that interesting because Alfred, the reason why he was poor and didn't have money was because he was sick.
Right.
And couldn't work.
Right.
And was at the doctor, like having to pay for doctors all the time. So, interesting.
So Bob and George, his partner, spent several days in Salt Lake City stocking up for the harrowing journey ahead of them. Tales of other prospectors running out of provisions were well known amongst aspiring and experienced treasure hunters, and this party wanted no part of that. But we'll see.
Yeah.
So the men all loaded their provisions onto wagons and set out from Bingham County on November 1st of 1873. Before they got too far, 2 other prospectors, Preston Nutter
These names, Preston Nutter
and Oliver Lautzenheiser, who a lot of people call Lot, joined instead of Oliver. Like what? Why would you? I didn't understand that reading this, but whatever.
You know how guys like to say their last names.
Yeah, okay, fair.
I don't know why.
Joined the party in Salina, Utah. Preston, at the very beginning, believed that the party was pretty poorly provisioned. Ooh, that's alliteration for the ages.
Mm-hmm.
But Packer, who said he knew the country all too well, assured them that the 400-mile journey would be achieved in only 20 days.
I feel like he might be a little misleading.
At first, the trip was easy, but eventually, when they crossed the Grand River, it became very clear to the party, at least to Oliver, that Alfred did not actually know the way and was lying when he said he could guide the group.
No.
It was at this point that he developed an intense aversion to Alfred. Oliver, who everyone called Lot, I guess we'll just call him Lot from here on out, Preston Nutter, and others within the group also developed disdain for him, and they accused him of being a thief who was willing to take things that did not belong to him, whether of any value or not, and of hogging supply rations that were shrinking.
It's kind of like he lies about stuff that's not important, and then he also just wants to take stuff that's not really important either sometimes. So what the hell is wrong with him? What's going on in this man's brain?
Bob, however, for some reason, felt very differently than everyone else, not understanding the other men's antipathy towards him, probably because he pitied him for his epilepsy, which he found out later in their expedition, although Alfred Packer told Bob that that was the first fit he'd ever had in his life.
I mean, I guess he was just trying to get him to take him. He's
probably.
I guess.
They eventually arrived at the Green River, about 85 miles from the Colorado border, and they were unable to find a point shallow enough to cross. They were forced to dismantle their wagons and kind of ferry them across. Of course, once on the other side, it became clear that Alfred Packer, in Bob's words, did not know the country or route better than the rest of us. So it became Lot's and Preston's responsibility to scout ahead for a good route. Bob said, for long stretches, we could see no road or trail on account of snow. But from time to time, they would come across a Native American on the trail. They'd pay them to guide them, and sometimes they'd go for a day or so and then tell the group, we're not going to go any further because there are enemies ahead.
Plus, y'all are traveling around in asinine times.
Asinine times. These times are not good to travel, and you need to travel in like 100 years or so. This is ridiculous.
No, like, because of the winter is all.
No, I know. So food, of course, began to run out, and there was not much hunting to be done except for the occasional rabbit. And this caused tensions to mount.
No.
Eventually, the group starved enough to the point where they were considering eating one of their horses. And for 5 days, as they continued making their way to San Juan, they ate only chopped barley.
Ugh, so it pretty much like oatmeal.
Or like beer.
Soaked in water.
Yeah.
Ugh.
On January 25th of 1874, 3 months after they left Utah, remember Alfred Packer told them 20 days, and starving, the group was surrounded by a band of natives dressed in war array. The party was trespassing on the Ute reservation, and one person in the party, known as Frenchy Cabazon, knew French, English, and Spanish, and was able to communicate with the natives and explain to one of them, named Ouray, that the group had no intention of settling in the area.
Okay, well, have fun continuing on your journey, says Chief Ouray.
Ouray was adequately convinced because the men were emaciated, and he was like, oh, maybe that's true, and displayed hospitality to them. He advised them not to travel any further in the mountains, and he even invited them to stay with the tribe until the spring.
Very generous.
Super. For a group of people who has been nothing but shit to you.
Right, and yeah, exactly. And these people, like, nobody even liked each other in the group themselves, so you're just, like, inviting them in.
The group agreed, and he led them to a spot less than 2 miles from his own village. Bob McGrew described it later as a spring where there was wood and plenty of grass for their animals. They put up shelters and settled in for the winter, putting together the money to buy flour, coffee, sugar, tobacco, and 3 goats to be butchered for their meat from the tribesmen. According to Lot, the chief treated them like brothers. So they took the advice of the natives, who knew the land better than they did. The spring came, and then they went back home. And that's the end of the show. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Just kidding. So within a week, Packer, Lot, and some others grew restless. And Ouray had told Frenchy that there was an outpost called the Los Pinos Indian Agency. I will further refer to this as the agency.
Yes.
About 80 miles east, and a cattle camp slightly closer, but warned them that the trails were buried under 3 or more feet of snow, and it would be against their best interests to try to get to either destination.
Well, yeah, he doesn't know anything.
No. Absolutely not.
His people haven't lived here for years
and
years.
In generations, truly.
Yes.
So, naturally, Lot and 4 others, Mike Burke, George Driver, and Isaac and Tom Walker, set out on foot. Alfred tried to follow, but Lot pointed his gun at Alfred and told him that if he had seen him after they passed the mountain, there would be trouble.
Dude, I'm telling you, that guy had a sense. He knew.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
The group took enough food for a week and headed into the wilderness, hoping to make it to the cattle camp in 3 or 4 days, because that worked out very well before.
Right.
And 3 weeks later, they came upon the camp. The men, however, became lost in the snow after exhausting their food supply and eventually had to subsist on rosebuds and wild berries. 3 of the 5 men who went out said they could go no further, and Oliver and Burke set off to find the cattle camp, finally coming across it when they spotted the smoke of the chimney coming out of the cabin in the cattle camp. So about 3 weeks after they set off, again, they thought 3 to 4 days, the group finally reached the camp. From the 5 that initially set off, there were now 2 haggard men, Lot and Mike Burke. 3 of the others were stranded in the snow, and the 2 cowboys at the cattle camp, James Kelly and Sidney Jocknick, loaded up a sled with provisions and found the 3 men huddled around a fire where they were given some coffee and meat and taken back to the cabin.
Saviors.
The group stayed at the camp for several weeks, and at the time they had no idea that during their own harrowing trek, Alfred Packer and 5 other men had started their own trek just a few days after them.
May end up a little bit less sunny than this one.
Ouray had pleaded with Packer's group not to leave and told them they would find those men that had gone before dead in the snow, and that they would all die as there was no native in the band that would go to show the route since they were afraid of the deep snow.
We know better than you.
Of course, the men knew better than the natives, so they didn't listen, and Ouray essentially used a stick to draw a map on the ground and gave them all the directions he could to the route. So on February 9th, a week after Lott's group had set out, Bob McGrew, Israel Swan, who was 60, George, California, Noon, who was 16.
Oh my goodness. I did not know this whole time that Noon was only 16.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even, that didn't register to me. Goodness gracious.
Frank Miller, who was German, Shannon Bell, and James Humphrey set out. By mid-afternoon of February 9th, the day they set out, Bob McGrew said he would go no further. He said the snow was so deep that I could not get the horses through it. So he unpacked the men's supplies from his horses and he turned right the fuck back. Aside from Alfred Packer, he testified later, he had never seen any of the rest of the party since.
I almost wonder, because Alfred did seem to have such a Alfred did seem to have like a soft spot for Bob McGrew. If he had stayed with them, if any of this would have happened.
Right.
I don't know.
So on April 16th at the agency, an employee, and April 16th is 2 months after they initially set out, an employee named Alonzo Hartman noticed a man coming down the little creek, walking leisurely on the ice. His first impression was that he didn't seem very different from any other man who had been exposed to the cold winter weather.
Leisurely.
What did I say?
No, you did.
Oh,
I just
sorry.
think it's an odd way to describe someone that's emerging from the wilderness, especially considering the circumstances.
Sure. The men who had listened to O'Ray and remained camped near the Ute village until the snow began to melt were Dr. Cooper, Preston Nutter, and a prospector known as Italian Tom. I don't know.
Come get some spaghetti.
And on April 2nd, again, remember, Alfred Packer left on February 9th, the men set out for the agency and reached it 2 weeks later, literally hours after Packer.
Good grief. That's what happens when you're an idiot and you don't just wait until the right time.
Sure. Who grew very visibly agitated.
Oh, when his old comrades showed up, you mean?
Like hours after him and left like months after him. Yeah.
Nerd.
Preston Nutter asked him where the rest of the party was. You know, the other 5 men that you set off with.
Yeah, where are those dudes?
And he said he didn't know because they had left him behind after he went to hunt and got his feet wet and frozen. Then he said he didn't want to be in Colorado any longer and wanted to go back home to good old Pennsylvania. So they set out for the town of Saguache, about 45 miles away.
They're not driving a car, so it's probably a little more than 45 minutes.
On their 11-day journey, Preston Nutter noticed that Alfred somehow had this big skinning knife that belonged to Frank Miller. So when he asked him how he had gotten it, Alfred Packer explained that Frank had stuck it in a tree and left it. Because when you have a skinning knife in the wilderness, you forget it sometimes. According to Packer's courtroom testimony, so honestly, is that very accurate? We know he's a liar.
But so is at the same time, so is everybody.
True.
I'm going to lie on the stand if I need to.
Fair. Are you going to cannibalize people, though, is the issue.
Have I already? You weren't supposed to talk about this.
Oh, sorry.
Just change the subject.
He said, quote, "When we left O'Ray's camp, we had about 7 days' food for one man. We traveled 2 or 3 days, and it came a storm. We came to a mountain, crossed a gulch, and came onto another mountain. We found the snow so deep that we had to follow the mountain on top, and on about the 4th day, we only had a pint of flour left."
This is so mind-boggling to me that you're at the top. You're at the top of a mountain. That's what you have to do. Is that really better? I just don't know.
I don't feel that it is.
Somebody's going to tell us it is, but like, how in the world up, 4,000 feet or something?
I don't feel that that's better.
And it's storming. I just don't imagine that. But maybe that's how you had to do it. I just don't know.
He went on to say that at about the 10th day of travel, they were living on rosebuds and pine gum.
Me too.
According to Packer, a couple of days later, Swan, the 60-year-old man that we talked about, had asked Alfred to go up and see if he could see anything from the top of the mountains. And when he came back, Shannon Bell was sitting near the fire roasting a piece of meat, which he had cut out of the leg of Frank Miller, and Miller's body was lying down in the stream, his skull crushed in with a hatchet.
Surprise!
It was again, according to Packer at this time, that Bell came at him with a hatchet. He swung and missed, so Packer picked it up and hit him on the top of the head with it. Head with it.
Like right at the pointy end.
Of the head. He said that for the better part of 60 days, he ate the remains of his companions. As the snow began thawing, he ventured out, carrying the remains of the men with him and cooking little meat at a time, eventually eating the very last of his meat just before he reached the agency.
I gotta eat that sweet meat. You know what, like, it reminds me of Dee and Charlie when they thought they ate human meat. Have you never seen that?
I don't remember that one.
Holy shit. So they think they eat human meat because Frank has all this random meat in the refrigerator that he has, like, not labeled, and they ate some of it and he got mad, so they were like, what is it? We gotta eat it. So they eat this meat, and then he tells them it's human meat. It turns out that it's tainted raccoon meat.
Oh, no.
That's giving them worms. And that's why they're going around, like, starving and feeling so weird, is because they have worms from the raccoon. So, good.
Oh, man, It's Always Sunny is genius.
It's absolutely brilliant. But
Chef's
I also
kiss.
wonder, what does it do to you to eat man meat? Does it do something weird?
You know what? I think it does.
Packer's confession was immediately released to the press, and the newspapers were not buying his bullshit, saying the cannibal is lying as villainously in his last confession as he did in his first, because he gave a number of confessions. So we'll talk about a few of those in this story. He is guilty of willful and premeditated murder. There is no doubt, they said. We don't really know.
Yeah.
Following his arrest, the papers had such inflammatory headlines as Putrid Packer, Captured Cannibal, and Man-Eating Murderer.
Again, love the alliteration.
Yeah, beautiful. They accuse him of being the most atrocious and cold-blooded murderer ever committed in the West.
Okay.
That's
a big title, though.
Even if he killed all 5 of those men, which is possible, but we don't know for sure. I don't even know if that could still be that he's the most atrocious and cold-blooded murderer. I'm just not really
don't
sure.
know.
In those conditions, I'm like,
See, that's the thing where it's like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's stranded.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Like, we don't know.
What would you, I don't know what I would do in a situation where I was starving for 10 days.
Well, we obviously know what the Jamestown settlers did whenever they were starving.
Sure, exactly.
And what they did on Alive whenever they crashed their plane in the mountains and the Andes and ate each other. So
the Donner Party.
the Donner Parties is
During this time for the same exact reason.
Yeah, and there was another one too, but I forget the name of, a very famous party of people that ended up eating each other. But anyway, they called it the most revolting crime of the century, leaving out all that slavery and stuff that they did to Native Americans and Africans.
Because it wasn't white people. It's fine.
Right. It's the most revolting crime of the century amongst whites. The Denver Republican had the most over-the-top headline saying, "Human jerked beef. The fiend who became very corpulent upon a diet of human steaks. A cannibal who gnaws on the choice cuts of his fellow man." Okay,
Oh my
Denver
God.
Republican. They were a bit
Enough.
much.
Enough.
They were a bit much this whole story. They believed he committed the murders explicitly to obtain the men's money and, more importantly, to eat their flesh, which is obviously my favorite term.
Their money, they had like $70 on them altogether.
Well, he ended up getting something because he kind of went on a mild spending spree.
Yeah, well.
But, I mean, regardless, I just don't know how much he really got out of all 5 of those dudes. But also, we have to think about the fact that he was willing to steal stuff that really didn't matter.
True.
Whether he cared about these men's lives or not.
But
I
was
don't
it
know.
premeditated? I don't think so. I think it was just
It's
opportunity.
hard. Maybe. It's also hard to say because then you think about him purposefully misleading them, perhaps. And then if he did that, then what was his point? Or was he just an idiot trying to fake his way through?
In my opinion, I think he was just an idiot trying to fake his way through.
Definitely possible. I just really don't know. While Packer is quite very likely the big old piece of shit that they had him pegged for, the papers had no qualms about stating hearsay as fact in regard to the case, and
That's crazy.
and began attributing a long list of what would be known today as cold cases to him, as though he'd been roving around the perpetrator of every single unsolved homicide in America at the time.
God forbid they actually do any kind of work.
It's so sad. He was named one of the most noted murderers the 19th century had produced, and considering he's of the same era as Billy the Kid and Jesse James, I think that's a fairly significant statement, though it's possible his list of victims is quite a bit inflated. Shortly after discovering the remains of Packer's travel companions, which were found decaying at their campsite, a major deposit of silver and gold were discovered a few miles away by a man named, listen to this name, Enos Throop Hotchkiss.
Oof.
After which he built himself a cabin, and then within a few short years, a whole town was up and running in that area.
Holy hell.
Lake City, as it was called, had 2 banks, several large stores, a newspaper, real estate offices, a theater, bakeries, billiard halls, barbershops, breweries, and the shining architectural jewel, the county courthouse. So it was like a really quick turnaround for the city to be built up, and it's obviously going to come into play with Packer's situation, that all of a sudden there's actually a town with law enforcement, things of that nature that, you know, you may not be able to get away with eating people as easily. After giving his confession, he was transferred to Lake City, where his trial would be held at the courthouse. The jailhouse, though, was incredibly inadequate as a frame of reference. A year prior, an angry mob had no trouble breaking into the lockup, dragging out a couple of criminals, and proceeded to hang them from a bridge after marching them out of town. Something that was not frowned upon at all by the citizens or the press of the city. And now, with all the shit-talking the press was doing about Packer, there was legitimate reason to be concerned that the citizens may once again attempt to take vengeance into their own hands in regard to him. So it was decided that he would be safer in the neighboring town of Gunnison, where they had recently made security improvements in the $8,000 range to ensure the prisoners stayed where they were. And that's a pretty significant amount of money back then.
Especially in that time, yeah.
He was transported from Denver to Gunnison by train, arriving early March 18th. For a fairly small town, Gunnison was overflowing with lawyers. There were 19 of them at the time, and immediately upon his arrival, Packer hired 4 of the best in town.
Oh my gosh. How was he able to
How did he get that money?
afford them?
I know. Especially because he couldn't even pay his way through the wilderness.
Right.
Aaron Himes was his lead attorney. Then there was his understudy. I don't know. Do you call it an understudy? Probably not.
I don't know. Assistant?
Assistant? Then there was
understudy.
That's an actor. Thomas C. Brown, Frank C. Gowdy, and a future judge, Alexander Gullett, were all hired by Packer. And he used money that he claimed to have accrued via some interest in mines, and not eating my friends and stealing their stuff. According to a friend, Nathaniel Hunter, who had been at the Los Pinos agency when Packer initially emerged from the woods, he said that he was counting on being acquitted, and what's more, he was counting on getting rich from the notoriety of his murder trial.
When did that law come into play where you can't make money off of your own story?
It's after this, because he had to agree later on that he would not make money.
Sure. Okay.
So I don't know. He continued to confirm his second confession that he did not kill any of the men aside from Bell, and that was out of self-defense, and completely denied committing any of the murders the papers were accusing him of, which probably was true, that part. You know, like all the random murders all over the country.
Like in New York or in South Carolina.
This person was found hung in their closet, and I'm sure that it was Alfred Packer.
Sure.
Under the theory that it would be easier to convict Packer for murdering an elderly victim for some reason, the prosecutors decided to try him for only one of the murders he committed, that of 60-year-old Israel Swan. Packer's lead attorney, Aaron Himes, moved to immediately quash the indictment, claiming it to be invalid on several grounds. The first was that it specified the crime was committed in the state of Colorado, but at the time, Colorado was a territory and not a state. Okay. I mean, that's law, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
The second was that it also said that the crime occurred in Hinsdale County, which at the time of the murders didn't exist.
Okay.
But, like, nothing did, you know? Like, nothing did.
Sure, but in, like, I think in terms of what the law says, I'm like, okay.
I know.
That makes sense.
I know. Finally, he argued that the court had no jurisdiction in the case, since if the crime had been committed at all, it had to have been committed on the then Ute Reservation.
Okay.
Again, these are all pretty cogent arguments, but, you know.
Well, there was just a case where something happened on a reservation in Oklahoma, and the pedophile got off because it happened on a reservation.
Yeah.
Not better, but that's why the laws of the land must be,
Yes.
I think, changed.
True.
Anyways.
The following morning, an amended indictment was presented, and yet again, Himes attempted to quash it. This time, he said his client could not be charged under the murder statute of 1881 since Swan was killed in 1874. And he also couldn't be tried under the murder statute of 1870 since due to a big fuck up on the part of the Colorado's legislature, which repealed it in 1881 and then didn't include a savings clause to allow the state to seek a murder conviction under the 1870 statute, even though it had been repealed. So basically they repealed it and then they never put anything in place to make it so that you could be charged with murder for this entire period of time, 1870 to 1881. So it's a long time. And although this argument did have merit, Judge Jerry, which is like really denied it. Then Packer's lawyers filed a motion for reasonable adjournment of the trial, claiming that the newspapers had written about Packer constantly attacking his character and saying he was a monster and could not be expected to have a reasonable trial in the town whatsoever. Regardless of your feelings about Packer, this was very much the case, as the sheriff and a bunch of other town leaders had to do a good deal of persuading of the local miners in order to stop them from getting a hold of Packer and hanging him.
Which makes sense. Yeah, sure.
It just isn't right. It's not right that you try someone in the same city where you've been just like for, years been, guess what? This guy ate everyone, it's just not fair. I would be pissed if it were me, to put it mildly. If I got caught cannibalizing, then I'd be pissed if they tried me in the same city where I got caught.
That would an outrage.
Fair cannibalism, please. Okay, so the trial began on April 9th, 1883. The courtroom was packed in minutes, but it was only big enough for 6 rows of chairs, so it's not like it was necessarily this huge courtroom in the first place. But signs were posted on the walls urging members of the audience, no spitting on the floor.
What? Why is that something that needs to be said?
I guess they were just chewing tobacco and just spitting it willy-nilly.
It was that time.
If you ever watch Deadwood, they just have the spit. It's not canteen. It's a cantoon? It's not a cantoon either.
A spittoon.
Spittoon. That's what it is. Oh, it's so disgusting. And that must smell
like
so
hell.
Awful.
But don't real tobacco chewers swallow their chew?
Do they?
I know Cody's dad chews and he swallows it. And I was like, yo, that is intense.
Oh, that's some country shit right there. Oh, okay. So, oh, goodness. Before any of the gore whores could get the dirty details of the murders that they were there for, they had to sit through hours of incredibly boring proceedings before any testimonies could begin. That'd be like you and me, we're sitting here waiting for all the dirty deets, and they're going over just the most absolute mundane details for hours on end.
I just want to be, from here on out, known as a gore whore. That's all I want.
That's how who wrote this book? Harold Schechter. That's what he said in the book. Gore. No, I said that.
I was like, wow,
no,
that's really.
No, it was me. Finally, shortly after 4 p.m., the all-male jury, are you surprised, was selected, sworn in, and they, along with the judge, clerk, sheriff, bailiff, 4 lawyers, Packer, and a potbelly stove, were all piled into the room.
I'm sorry, a potbellied stove?
It was in there.
Oh.
Keeping them all warm, even though they were all sweating their asses off for some reason. Preston Nutter, who had come to Colorado as part of the doomed prospecting party, and we talked about a little bit earlier, had since then become a wealthy man. He started an ore freighting business. He was much respected in the community and had been elected to the state legislature in 1881, not like that means jack shit, before retiring 2 years prior to Packer's trial to devote himself to cattle ranching. He was a no-nonsense, straight-talking cowboy who probably swallowed his tobacco chew. His outright disdain for Packer was something that he could not hide, and he proved to be an incredibly damaging witness against him. He testified that he first met Packer with the rest of the gentlemen going across country in November of 1873, like Bianca said, and confirmed that there was a man by the name of Israel Swan amongst the group. Then, how he arrived to the Los Pinos agency on April 16th, where he begrudgingly reunited with Packer, who had initially claimed that Swan and the other men had left him to fend for himself after he got his feet wet and frozen while out searching for game. He said Packer insisted his party had been reduced to living strictly on beans, which Nutter noted was odd at the time, because he had killed many mountain sheep everywhere they had gone, all over the country.
That is interesting.
He grew even more suspicious when he saw that Packer was in possession of that knife that you spoke about, Frank Miller's skinning knife. He also found it interesting that Packer, who was so poor when the party left for Gunnison City that he had to have his travel expenses covered by Bob McGrew, somehow came into money while being stranded and surviving off beans to buy the horse and saddle that he had arrived to the Love's Penis agency with. And I think I forgot to just call it the agency. After some questioning, Packer offered his initial confession and said he would lead a search party to the spot of the final campsite. But as they set out for the short ride, are you shocked? Packer suddenly claimed to be entirely lost, and Nutter was then certain he was guilty of murdering the men.
Of course.
I just can't find
So
it.
would
I
I
don't
be.
know. Like,
Yeah.
it's not that difficult, dude. Oh my goodness, it's not that far away either. He said he last saw Swan's dead body about 2 miles from the courthouse, his body badly decayed, almost completely, partially covered by a blanket that had patches of matted hair and blood on it, and his skull showed a large cut that was as long as his hand was wide and went clear down through the skull. That blanket thing I found interesting, because I think if anyone that is familiar with, true crime, that kind of thing shows that there
He was
was
trying to hide it.
some remorse, or he was
Yeah.
trying to, like there was some relationship with him and the person that he murdered, and he felt some sort of guilt afterwards. Although there was no flesh left on the corpse in order to determine if it had been cut from the body, he did observe a significant detail about the man's clothes. They had been cut and ripped up and piled on the body or near the body. He said it looked as though the seams had been opened and the clothing cut right square where there wasn't a seam. This clearly suggested that the victim's clothing had been ransacked by the killer. Bell asked about the last time that Nutter had seen the men alive and how they were equipped for their journey. Nutter told him that they were all equipped with the provisions needed to get them through 7 to 8 days at the very least, and were headed for what had become Gunnison City, but had at the time been a government cattle camp for the Ute Indians.
Real quick, so didn't he say that they were gonna get there in 20 days?
Yeah, so they're still under provisioned.
Wait, that's what I was gonna say, is that even then, wouldn't they be severely under provisioned?
For sure.
Like,
it's like
that doesn't make sense either.
I guess they were maybe they were just like, I can understand somewhat just from backpacking where you try to pack light because
Sure.
you're like, you can't, every little thing is like a huge energy waster. So
Sure.
you're trying to be so maybe they were just like, we can, diet down for
Sure.
a few months or for a month, not even a month, 20 days, and take half the stuff we need and maybe, hunt.
Eat a third,
Hunt on the way there or something. I don't know. Either way, I do think, man, it's in the fucking winter, you guys.
Also, yeah, you're in the winter, so that's that's the other thing I would think is like, shit, well, it's the winter. It's not like there's like a ton of fucking game out there.
I mean,
what's wrong with you?
Well, I don't know. They claim, a lot of people as we'll see here, do claim that there was a lot of game out there, but still, it's just like, seems very short-sighted. Well, it was short-sighted that they left in the first place,
Right.
I guess. So,
Yeah.
they're just a bunch of men with big dick swinging problems that were going around. Big dick swinging energy, little dick true energy.
True.
So he said that it was at this same time that he witnessed Swan's body, that he saw the rest of the men's bodies as well. All of the men showed hatchet wounds, except one that he said, I don't know if there was a cut in the head, but the back of the head was entirely mashed in as though struck hard. He said mashed, and I was like, can you put an S in front of that, please? Because that sounds worse.
Yeah, mashed sounds a lot worse than smashed.
When asked about the arrangement of all the bodies, Bell handed him a stack of books and asked him to arrange them in the way the bodies were strewn about. They had all been a few feet apart from each other in a space that was only half as large as the already fairly small courtroom, so they were all pretty close. It seemed like they were perhaps killed where they were sleeping. When it was all said and done, Nutter had testified for almost 2 hours. In his final question, Bell asked him if it was pretty well known among the group that Swan had a lot of money. And though the line of questioning was objected, they did introduce to the court their theory for motive, that Alfred Packer murdered Israel Swan for moolah.
Cash money.
The next day, General Charles Adams was the first to take the stand. He described meeting Packer at breakfast at Otto Mears' house, which is one of the fellas, in 1874, and how he told the same story he originally told after emerging from the wild, which was that he and the 5 men had left the Ute camp in February, wandered in the mountains for several days, after which he had frozen the toes in parts of his feet. The men had stayed with him for a few days, but eventually had to leave him on a mountainside because he could not keep up with them. Find that hard to believe.
I don't know
Old
about
Swan.
that, yeah.
One of the men had given him a rifle, and he was eventually able to start walking again, which I'm not sure how he just healed his frostbite toes in the winter.
Yeah, exactly.
Hunting rabbits and then eating rosebuds to survive until he reached the agency. Considering that Packer had claimed to be surviving off such meager nutrition as vegetation, because that's primarily, it was like one rabbit and then the rest was rosebuds.
Right.
Adams thought perhaps the other men could be out there still alive and proposed putting a party together to go search for the men, with Packer leading as a guide, which probably wouldn't be the best idea.
That's not the great idea. That's not the greatest idea, sir.
No, it's not. The next day, Adams and Packer met a few of the original party from Utah at the agency, where he learned that there were a ton of suspicious circumstances surrounding Packer and his expedition to Gunnison City with the 5 men. One being that Packer had allegedly been spending money like a madman when he was staying in, Sawatch. Adams asked Packer where he had gotten all that money and caught Packer up in a lie, which eventually led to Packer giving his initial confession. It was in this confession that he claimed 3 of the men, Swan, Humphrey, and Miller, had died from starvation and were in turn eaten by the rest of the survivors.
Not him, though.
No. Then Noon was shot by Bell so that he could eat him. Then Bell attempted to bludgeon Packer to death with the barrel of his rifle, so Packer had to shoot him in self-defense. Packer then lived on his flesh for several days, then took some of the flesh along with him, and finally reached the agency. Like you said, he said he'd only been out of meat for 1 or 2 days before he reached it, and confessed to scavenging the money from Humphrey's body only. Which, very...
I don't know.
Coincidental.
Yeah.
Adams said he had Packer repeat the statement in front of witnesses, including several of the men who had been in the original party from Utah, many who were quite dubious of Packer's claims, but said that if Packer could lead them to the bodies and the rifle that had supposedly been used to smash a head in turn been shattered on Packer's head, they would be able to corroborate his story. He said the men arrived back 10 to 14 days later without having found the bodies, so he advised that Packer be sent to, I cannot believe, Sawatch for safekeeping until the snow thawed and the bodies could be found. Well, it was 9 goddamn years later that before Adams would ever see Packer again, because he had escaped from the sheriff and Sawatch. On the train taking Packer from Cheyenne to Denver is where Adams met him once again. Packer was quick to unburden himself, as most idiot criminals are wont to do, telling Adams he always wished he could talk to him since he escaped the sheriff, that his soul was seemingly driven toward him in order to give him the real truth. That sounds almost like you're in love with him or something.
No kidding, yeah.
Take it down a notch.
Okay. Chill out.
That evening, once he arrived in Denver, Packer gave his second confession, which was read to the jury in court. Following this recitation, Bell asked Adams if Packer had ever given any reasons why he did not tell the truth in his initial confession, to which Adams said that Packer said he was very much excited and didn't know what he was saying at the time.
What?
But as Adams stated in his testimony, Packer didn't seem excited at all and was actually perfectly cool. This does, however, contradict an observation that Adams had made back in 1874, because we have to remember they're giving these testimonies 9 years later.
After, yeah.
It's kind of, that's the other thing about this is even the witnesses, you have to take some of this testimony with a little bit of a grain of salt,
sure,
because their memories are being colored by the news and their own memory. You know how we all do.
Even 30 minutes after you see something happen, you don't remember
every little detail.
Darren Brown, I don't know if you know who Darren Brown is, but he did kind of an experiment where somebody stole a purse off of a woman in front of a group of witnesses, and he asked them, what did he look like? What was he wearing? What was his hair like? And they all got it all the way the fuck wrong. Oh my God. So yes, 30 minutes from when that initial thing happened, and 9 years
later,
I'm sorry, you're not going to get everything right.
None at all. So Adams said that back in 1874, when he reported to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs that Packer showed traces of mental aberration at the time of his first statement. So it's also, I do have to say that I went into this story thinking he absolutely did it. And then the more I read, I was like, well, I mean, he probably did do it, but I do think that everybody pretty much, was out to get him and had their own ideas and then kind of like ran wild with him.
Sure.
So, I don't know.
And I went into this thinking that, oh yeah, this guy's a fucking cannibal. But then I'm like, shit, A, what the fuck would I do?
Yeah.
That's like the first thing I do is like, what would I do in this situation? And then second, I'm like, well, there's a lot of journalism surrounding this case because it's the most heinous case in the United States. But yeah, I mean, it's very hard. It's very difficult to ascertain what really happened.
Yeah, it really is.
Anyways.
Regardless, he was yet another effective witness for the prosecution in the case against Old Maneater, painting a picture of Packer, who was not traumatized by the events that unfolded, but was a cool, calculating liar, even if he himself was kind of lying.
Here's another thing, though. Even during this case, a lot of people, when they said Packer arrived at the agency, they said that he was either given meat and was eating it like a hungry man that was starving, or that he was like, meh, about the meal.
It was contradictory, yeah.
Or that he didn't really want anything to eat, and he was like, oh, I'll just have a whiskey. Like, there are so many contradictory accounts on Alfred Packer that I still don't know, what to really believe.
I know. I don't either. Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. Following this, Otto Mears testified, saying that back in the spring of 1874, after arriving in Saguache, Packer had asked to buy a saddle and a horse, which was $100, which is quite a bit at the time. He then pulled out a wallet and handed Mears the money, who, after examining the bills, said he believed one of the tens to be counterfeit. Packer then pulled out a second wallet, according to Mears, which is a little weird. A few more witnesses testified to seeing Packer in the possession of considerable amounts of money and spending pretty lavishly, losing quite a bit on games of freeze-out, which I guess is a type of poker.
Okay. I was like, what is it?
I don't know. I was like, is this like a game they play outside or what? Like they just lock you outside and see how long you can survive?
God,
You just take bets? Then came the testimony of Hezekiah Musgrave, who was the prospector that had been the first to examine the remains of Packer's butchered companions. He said he saw 5 men lying there as though they had been killed by some sharp instrument, looked like it might be a hatchet, and struck in the head. When asked if there were indications that flesh had been cut off the bodies, Musgrave said that flesh had been cut from one of them, commencing at the breast and running down, also around, cut down that far as he went down his stomach with his finger. He said one of the men had significantly deep cuts, like from the corner of a hatchet, and another's head had been completely mashed in.
Okay,
corroborating.
again with the mash.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
These guys just love to
smash.
say that.
Just say smash. That's
Smashed in,
more,
guys.
It's
Come
less
on.
bad. God.
Then the constable, who had Packer in his custody, Herman Lauter, took the stand and told how Packer had rushed him with a skinning knife as they were traveling, and they had stopped for lunch, at which time Packer had actually poisoned him. He says that
alive.
he says that they ate lunch, and then shortly following that, he was super ill. And he believes Packer poisoned him.
Okay.
It could have been that you were eating at some shitty hotel saloon type of place. And you were eating fucking, what did we talk about Mutton.
What did we talk about last time?
Mutton.
Yeah, you could have been eating mutton.
And it made you sick, just like it made Lizzie Borden's family
sick.
The parallels. The day ended with a few people who testified that Packer had told them he was related to prominent individuals who just so happened to share his last name. Something which was obviously a lie. The third day of Packer's trial began with Lot's testimony. Lot, along with another man, Joseph Selig, had founded the town of Montrose, and he had been named county commissioner by the governor. Lot said that Packer, along with some of the other men in his party, had an unnatural interest in finding out how much money other men in the party had on them.
Oh, that's weird.
He said Packer seemed the most persistent in attempting to find out everyone's money situation, and his testimony came to a close. But he did say that everybody was kind of creepy in the group.
I mean, how many prospectors are not creepy?
No offense to all you prospectors
to all
out
the prospectors that exist that listen to the show. I'm sorry if I offended you. But, like, honestly, when I think of a prospector, I think of somebody who's, like, like Alfred Packer, who's got no front teeth and is like really chomping at the bit to get like his part of the gold rush. That's who I think of.
It has a mustache that's even too extreme for me.
Oh yeah,
I do like a mustache. I don't know why.
I know you like one on Henry
on certain
Cavill.
people, yeah.
Specifically Henry Cavill, for sure. And Evan Peters, might I add.
Then it was the moment everyone was wetting their britches about. Alfred Packer was called to the stand for the defense, and he would not disappoint. He spoke for 2 straight hours, rambling on and on like me talking about my old rave days, in a way that one chronicler described as more of a harangue than coherent, calm, and collected testimony. He was likened to the mentally unstable assassin of President James Garfield, Charles Guiteau, whose trial had taken place only 2 years earlier. He started with a list of demands, as you do, saying that he didn't want to be questioned until after he made his statement, which he had been patiently waiting to make since he left Utah. Interesting. Okay. Then, very important person. Then he asked for 4 of the witnesses from the day prior to be brought to the courtroom.
What?
He's making demands, man. And guess what? The prosecution said that while it was highly unusual and the parties in question weren't even in the court that day, they had no objection to allowing Packer his demands for some reason. I have no idea. But I mean, it's the only fairness of the whole thing, I guess. I don't know. He said he had to sit through 27 witnesses against him, and he himself had none. So give him his witnesses, even though they testified against him the day prior. I don't know. He then proceeded to tell a tale of his life, of working as a miner, how he got lead poisoning and had to give it up. He said he left for Bingham and found lodging at a boarding house near some smelters like Bianca talked about. He said it was that he'd been leaded multiple times that summer, which is what they called lead poisoning back then, which threw him into fits, and everyone thought he was going to die. Yeah. But I bring this up. Lead poisoning, have we talked about it at all?
I know that I don't think that we have, but I know last podcast did about...
There's some theories about how the baby boomers.
Exactly, and why they're so...
awful. Except for those of you that listen, because we know you're not.
Just like how in general, just like millennials are talked about in general, like in a kind of general sense, the baby boomers are talked about in a general sense as well. Mm-hmm. And generally, baby boomers are thought to be less empathetic and less willing to listen to reason,
and serial killers.
And there have been way more serial killers in that era than there have been in recent years.
And you'd think if there were a ton right now, we'd probably know. Mm-hmm. There are some, though. There are some that we pretend like they're not
there's
going
Luca
on.
Magnotta.
In Chicago, there's black women are getting killed like crazy, and something is going on.
Sure.
Something is going on there.
Even within our own generation, there's Luca Magnotta, who was killing cats. Mm-hmm. And
he's a cat serial killer.
Well, he killed his boyfriend too, or like a sex partner of his at the very least. Uh-huh. Like it's not just one generation that this is happening to. However, it's the lead poisoning. The lead is kind of a big deal.
I mean, lead was everywhere.
Like, everywhere. As a realtor, I had to have people sign disclosures saying there was lead paint in here
from before 1970.
Exactly, 74.
Yeah. So,
anyways.
He said he saw a doctor, rested up, got better, moved to another boarding house, and found out about an outfit that was about to head to Colorado, a place he'd been before and wanted to go back, and I do not blame him. That's when he met Bob McGrew, the man that financed his travel expenses. And he said that Bob took a kind of a liking to him because he felt bad for him because he'd been sick and was unable to work. And, he said that he complained loudly when provisions ran low. And at one point he suggested killing the lame horse to eat it, but McGrew couldn't do it. Eventually he said that the band of Indians led by Chief Array came upon the men and took them to their land. The 21 prospectors all made various shelters, some sleeping in wagons, some having tents, sleeping in dugouts, and Israel Swan and Alfred Packer slept in a shanty that they built together out of brush and leaves, which he said was pretty hard living, but he was content. But he didn't say why the fuck he and the other men left the camp against Oray's warnings, only stating that he and a few of the men had made up their minds to go find the agency, saying they had 7 days grub for one man, 2 blankets, and a cooking utensil, which is a bit different than what the other guys were saying.
Sure.
He said after 2 days of wandering in the snow, the 6 men were down to their last pint of flour. And this is some poor planning by 6 separate individuals that I'm finding highly fucking unlikely. Highly unlikely. I mean, they all did some poor planning, but one...
But out of all of them?
Yeah. All of them to say, well, let's just all share provisions for one man
for 7
days. Let's go out for 20, though. You know? Doesn't make any sense. So... He then said that they boiled snow water and made a mush of it, which is what they pretty much just were subsisting off of.
So just water.
Water with a little barley mush in it.
Oh my God, I would kill. No, can't do it.
I would kill someone and eat them.
Yes, exactly.
When they were done, he said it was storming so badly with the winds blowing fiercely and snow so deep that they couldn't see a thing or follow the gulches and had to follow the ridges. They plowed through the Rockies and eventually ate the very last of their flour. So George Noon, the little 16-year-old, gave his goatskin moccasins for them to roast and eat. Then they used up their matches and had to carry the fire around in a coffee pot, which Swan carried to keep his hands warm because he was older and getting worn out and sick. Which, I mean, could be likely.
Sure.
Then about 4 to 5 days after they ate Noon's moccasins, Bell gave up his for another meal. Yum, yum. The men started to get testy with one another with the lack of food in them, and arguments began to take place here and there. He said the men continued on for 5 to 6 days until they found a patch of rosebuds, which they promptly devoured. Then the men ate Packer's moccasins one night when they camped up on top of the ridge near the top of the Rockies. I don't even understand. Packer said that Bell grew increasingly angry, and the starvation was taking a bigger toll on him than any of them.
Why?
I don't know. I have no idea. He's like, he weighed 10 pounds more than us, so he must have been just about ready to kill us all. They continued, I think it's just to set the stage here.
Yeah, okay.
They continued on not knowing where they were or where they were trying to go due to all the snow.
Right.
Gee, who would have thought?
Right.
He said they ate anything they could possibly find that resembled food, some of it making them sick, and carried on. One day they found a lake and hiked on until they camped in the woods near some willow and cottonwood buds and resigned themselves to die there.
Fair.
Swan said he was entirely done, and they had all decided they wouldn't leave him there, which I found dubious.
I don't know.
So they were all done for. They all just decided, well, if you're going to stay, I'm going to die. I don't know about that.
I don't know. No.
Then Packer offered to go over another ridge and see if the agency was there, an idea which the men all begged him to actually carry out, he claims. He walked a ways and came upon rosebuds, ate some, couldn't see a thing, and then ventured back to the camp. And that was when he saw Bell standing by the fire with that meat piece that he had hacked off and attacked him.
So it's that permission that he got from seeing somebody else eating somebody else, and they were like, you know what? Yep. Okay. This makes the most sense.
Right. So Packer said that after he killed Bell, he called out to the rest of the men, but received no response.
Sure.
Because he was trying to say that he'd already killed them all.
Right.
He was given the same books to arrange in the way the men were, which he did, claiming all the while that Bell had murdered all of them with the hatchet he had tried to come at Packer with, and even began hacking meat off of one of the bodies, which was still laying there by the fire. Packer then said his one regret was that the following morning he ate that piece of meat that Bell had left laying by the fire. Interesting, because then you talk about carrying meat with you. So he contradicts himself quite often.
Are you saying he might be lying?
It's possible. This is what hurt me, eating this meat. It had hurt me for 9 years. I was not responsible for what I eat. I couldn't help it. Right there, I had no feeling. I had no fear of freezing. I was just happy. Right there, I cut that piece of meat, boiled it in a tin cup, and I eat a little, he said. Okay. He gave very few details about the time that followed, when he camped beside the corpses and continued to hack meat off of his former companions to subsist off of. What he did say came off as though he felt he had been living in a dream, which, I mean, you probably would, you know? I felt like that today, just sleeping for 5 hours, you know?
Yeah.
He said he would live that way for a while, then attempt to find the agency, come back, and do it all over again. Then he testified that he did take the men's money, something he claimed to be remorseful about, saying he took a 50 out of Bell's pocketbook and a 20 off the collective rest of the guys, but that anything more he left right there on the ground.
Okay.
Sure you did.
Well, I mean, why would you even come back for the money either? Like, if you were really just trying to survive, the last thing I feel that you're thinking about is money.
You would think so. But I mean, again, who knows?
That's just me.
Yeah. Because out in the wilderness, that money don't do shit.
Exactly. What wolf can I pay to give me some?
Will you share that rabbit with me,
Exactly.
Please? Then he described his eventual journey to the agency, where he had to trudge through snow that was at times up to his neck. He said he took the dead limbs of trees and tied them together with strings from his blanket to make snowshoes, but it didn't work, so he had to remove them. He brought the coals in a coffee pot and pieces of meat in his backpack. Anytime he came across rosebuds, he would stop and eat them, and eventually he ate his last 3 pieces of meat 3/4 of a mile away from the agency, which he didn't know at the time. He then went to town on Larry Dolan, who was the saloon keeper in Saguache, who he, honestly spent a lot of money at his saloon. He was gambling and drinking his life away.
Okay.
May have been sleeping around. I don't blame him. He said his testimony the day prior was full of contradictions and inconsistencies, which is kind of well, so was yours. As he got more and more worked up, he began to make a worse and worse impression on the court as he was slightly psychotically rambling.
Well, yeah.
He continued that once he got to the agency, he was confused and exhausted and didn't know what he was saying, which, I mean, I'll give him that. He admitted he did lie a bit, but he did tell the truth about killing Bell. Then he said the constable story about wrestling the knife away from him was laughable, as the little Dutch man could never get a knife away from old Packer, period.
Oh, God.
He had to, add that in.
Oh, God.
I got a bigger dick than this guy.
Yeah.
He described his escape from the sheriff and what happened until his eventual arrest, concluding his testimony with the following statement. "Now, gentlemen, this is the whole story of it. Now I'm going to quit. It isn't interesting what I have done from that on." And it was time for cross-examination by District Attorney Bell, who picked apart every little detail of the confession entered into evidence, because there's 7 others, and then this testimony, and all of it doesn't add up with each other. When asked why 6 men only took provisions enough for 1...
There we go.
Packer said that they believed the agency to only be a short ways away, which is bullshit, considering that Ouray warned them against making the journey to begin with.
Which was only 45 miles away.
Good grief. And you're walking in snow that's supposedly up to your neck, so come now, dude. He said the men were out of food after 3 to 4 days, to which Bell responded that even if they were rationing, they had more than he initially claimed, to which he unhappily conceded. When Bell said that doing the math, they actually had provisions for 6 men for 4 days, or for 24 days for 1 man, Packer really couldn't keep up. His point, as he kept on, was that the men had far more food than he claimed, something that began to call into question his claims that Bell was so driven by hunger that he slaughtered all the men for food. He recounted coming upon Bell, who was crouched beside the fire, who then turned and began coming after him with the hatchet, saying that he shot him just above his right eye, then struck him with the sharp end of his hatchet. This was, of course, after Bell had already murdered and began hacking up the others, supposedly. When asked why there seemed to be no sign of a struggle with any of the men, Packer explained that they were all nearly dead anyway, and it would not have taken much to kill them.
But why wouldn't it have taken... Okay. You would have had the same amount of weakness and lack of nutrition that all of the other men.
Yeah.
So how could you have done that? Should have taken the same exact amount of effort.
Yes, and you were able to defend yourself and kill someone. Right. So he said that he swung the boys in together, arranging their bodies closer, and covered them with a blanket. Some of the wounds were deep, he said, some of their brains showed. With that, Packer was dismissed and had been on the stand for nearly 6 hours.
Jesus Christ.
His performance on the stand was later described by the Silver World as thinly disguised falsehoods and occasional displays of his native fiendish spirit. They really like to flower it up. Packer, on the other hand, felt sure that he convinced the jury of his innocence, commenting to his jailer later that night about all the pretty ladies that attended the trial.
Oh, my God.
Saying when he was set free, he could easily marry a Lake City woman.
Sure.
They're all hot and horny for that
sure.
man-eating cannibal.
I'm sure, with no teeth.
With no teeth and a dirty mustache.
Oh, God.
While there is no transcript of the closing statements from either the defense or prosecution, and newspaper accounts are fairly sketchy, Aaron Himes believed that the circumstances indicative of guilt were equally consistent with those of innocence.
So, nothing.
So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to go about it in an actual legal way, it is not a great argument. You can't really prove that he did it. That's the point.
He's as innocent as he is guilty.
Yes. I mean,
which is how much? How much is that?
The prosecution... Why? Why do I Sean Connery at every episode? The prosecution closed, attempting to take the many different circumstances pointing to guilt and make one solid rope from them, a rope they wanted to put around Packer's old neck. They would later be praised in the local press for their masterly effort.
Okay.
I don't know why the press had such a boner for getting Packer. I mean, I guess, do we all do this? Maybe we do.
I don't know. I feel like the media always wants to demonize somebody.
Yeah.
And if they have somebody to pin it on, let's pin it on.
Like an easy one for sure.
Yeah.
By the end of their closing arguments on Thursday, April 12th, as the Silver World put it, the conclusion was irresistible that Packer was guilty of the fiendish crime of deliberately and with diabolical premeditation having piloted his 5 unsuspecting victims into the defiles of these mountains, and while they slept, murdered them in cold blood for their money.
I don't know.
Yeah.
While they were sleeping? No, I don't. Look, I mean, maybe, but why would you deliberately go out into the wilderness and just starve yourself?
Maybe he wasn't starving. Who knows? It's possible he did it just so that he could kill them all. I don't know. The jurors took their first ballot, which was later reported to result in an 11-1 for conviction. A few hours later, the lone wolf holding out on the guilty verdict folded because everyone was like, do it, we want to go home.
Yeah.
I've been in that situation and it sucks. And at the opening of court the following morning, Friday, April 13th, they delivered the verdict of guilty of premeditated murders, which is a little audacious, I think. After polling the jurors, Himes moved for a new trial on a dozen different grounds, among them that the jury had no power to render such a verdict, that the verdict didn't sustain an indictment, that the court had no jurisdiction to hear the case in the first place, and that they had not been drawn according to the law, the jurors. Which is probably true. Honestly, all of it's probably true. When the motion was denied, he threatened to appeal to the Colorado Supreme Court and, if necessary, the U.S. Supreme Court. Then, in late afternoon, Packer was finally directed to stand and face Judge Jerry, causing a bunch of commotion in the courtroom, to which Jerry banged his gavel and ordered them to chill out if you want historical accuracy. His voice tinged with emotion, Judge Jerry asked, Alfred Packer, have you any reason to or cause to show the court why the sentence of death should not be pronounced on you? Packer bitterly responded, I don't feel I am guilty of the act I am charged with. He was asked, what is your age? And Packer lied. 34, he said.
Why? Why lie again?
He was 7 months away from being 40.
Why?
I have no idea.
What is the point of that?
He asked, is your correct name Alfred Packer, or is it assumed? Judge Jerry began his sentence, which was later described as one of the finest documents of this character ever heard in a courtroom by the Silver World.
My God.
That Silver World wanted to blow old Judge Jerry. He began. It becomes my duty as the judge of this court to enforce the verdict of the jury rendered in your case and impose upon you the judgment which the law fixes as the punishment of the crime you have committed. It is a solemn, painful duty to perform. I would to God the cup might pass from me. You have had a fair and impartial trial.
So drama.
You have been faithfully and earnestly defended by able counsel. The presiding judge of this court, upon his oath and conscience, has labored to be honest and impartial in the trial of your case, and in all doubtful questions you have had the benefit of the doubt. Yada, yada, yada. He just...
Bloviates a little bit?
Yeah. Let's just hear how dramatic he got. In 1874, you and company of 5 companions passed through the beautiful mountain valley where stands the town of Lake City. At that time, the hand of man had not marred the beauties of nature.
Oh, goodness
The
gracious.
picture was fresh from the hands of the great artist who created it. You and your companions camped at the base of the grand old mountain, and in sight of the place you now stand on the banks of a stream as pure and beautiful as was ever traced by the finger of God upon the bosom of your earth. Okay.
Oh my God.
He's like writing a goddamn novel, and then to other sickening details of your crime I will not refer. Silence is kindness. I do not say things to harrow your soul, for I know you have drunk the cup of bitterness to its very dregs, and wherever you have gone, the sting of your conscience and the goadings of remorse have been an avenging nemesis which have followed your every turn in life and painted afresh for your contemplation the pictures of the past.
I can't tell if I feel like he's just absolutely bloviating or actually speaking beautifully. Because I'm like,
he's a dick, so no.
I'm like, ugh. But then I'm also like, I wish I spoke that eloquently.
Well, he
day.
wrote this out.
Oh.
He wrote it out. I keep thinking, okay, I'm going to stop, and then I see more. I'm like, okay, wait. He says, I say these things to impress upon your mind the awful solemnity of your situation and the impending doom which you cannot avert.
Oh, God.
Be not deceived.
Oh.
God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap.
Oh, God.
You, Alfred Packer, sowed the wind. You must now reap the whirlwind. Oh, society cannot forgive you for the crime you have committed. It enforces the old Mosaic law of life for a life, and your life must be taken as the penalty of your crime. Yeah.
Okay, so now I think I reached the point where I'm like, all right.
Good Lord. At the end, Alfred Packer, he declared, the judgment of this court is that you be removed from hence to the jail of Hinsdale County and there confined until the 19th of May, A.D., 1883. I know, like, really. And that on said 19th day of May, 1883, you be taken from thence by the sheriff of Hinsdale County to a place of execution prepared for this purpose. And at some point within the corporate limits of the town of Lake City, and in said county of Hinsdale, and between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. of said day, you then and there, by said sheriff, be hung by the neck until you are dead, and may God have mercy upon your soul.
I'm sure.
Let's get original with that ending.
Can I just tell you that 18 whatever 80 reminds me, I just want to say real quick, that reminds me of Spanish, where we say 1976, which means 1976, which is 1976. Why do we have to be dramatic about years?
I don't know.
That's all I got to say. Okay, keep going.
All right. Packer sat stoically throughout much of Jerry's sentencing, but broke out in sobs at the mention of his aging mother and father. And who knows? And when the death sentence was pronounced, his face twisted with fury. He threatened Larry Dolan and Otto Mears with bodily harm if he ever got the chance. His lawyer promptly told him to shut up.
Of course.
Following his conviction, the Lake City Silver World ran an editorial of smug congratulation, calling it one of the fairest criminal trials on record. The writer, Henry C. Olney, boasted that the prisoner was given every opportunity to prove his innocence and was unable, something that is woefully ignorant to say in the first place, as we are presumed innocent until proven guilty, and proving one's innocence is not on us as defendants. But, whatever. He believed while the evidence was circumstantial, it all pointed conclusively at Packer being a cold-blooded murdering cannibal. Many, though, of Olney's peers in the Colorado press disagreed with his assessment, calling the trial a travesty. J.C. Fincher, publisher of the Breckenridge Daily Journal, believed the prosecution's theory that a man should willingly go into the jaws of death, believed that the prosecution's theory that a man should willingly go into the jaws of death, risk starvation, death by frost, and save himself only by the most revolting of food in order to commit a wholesale murder for a few dollars was too absurd to receive the universal sanction that it was given. He felt in contrast that Packer's story was consistent and natural and bore the evidence of truth. I mean, maybe it's consistent in, the main points, but there's definitely some inconsistencies in the little details. This J.C. Fincher's most scathing criticism was saved for Judge Jerry, saying...
Such an intimidating name.
Do you think it's Gary? It's Gerry. I can't imagine that it would be Gary.
I can't imagine that it would be Gary. Yeah. I think it would be Jerry. Yeah. I think it's Jerry.
Yeah. Saying his pre-sentencing speech was a tirade of abuse against the prisoner, and his assertion that Packer had a fair trial was little more than a gratuitous insult. Obviously, the community, who had been plowed with news and speculation of Packer and his situation and had pretty openly declared their mission to lynch him, was not exactly the place to conduct the most fair and balanced trial. I mean, I think anyone with a brain can see that. And Fincher was not alone. There were other papers that felt the same way. The Grand Junction news editor, Edwin Price, challenged Olney's assertion that, quote, no other verdict was possible, and believed that had Packer had more competent representation, he would have been cleared of all charges. He also agreed with Fincher that Judge Jerry was an asshole, whose senseless declamation exhibited utter disregard of Packer's rights as a human being, as he put it. I mean, you could also argue that, Packer eating his friends was
not great.
A violation of their rights, but, even even more critical was the Pueblo chieftain, whose editors believed that had Packer been tried anywhere else but Lake City, that the chances were 5-1 that he would be acquitted. While they believed that he was no doubt a murderer, they believed he committed the murders under mitigating circumstances, as he had been driven insane by starvation at the time of the murders. It's not a bad point.
Yes.
Regardless of the opinions of the press, Packer was to be hung in a gallows built specifically for the occasion just outside of town. But Ehrenheim had other plans. When the state's legislature repealed the murder law of 1870 and enacted a new one, they failed to include a savings clause like we talked about earlier, and so Heim made the argument that there was no operative statute for which anyone could be tried for murder between the years of 1870 and 1881. It's a fucking free-for-all.
Yeah.
Just murder everybody, and you can't do shit about it. And this is the argument he took to the state Supreme Court in regard to Packer's sentence. And on Friday, May 11th, 1883, Chief Justice Beck agreed with Packer's lawyers, reversed his sentence, and granted him a new trial. Heim quickly filed for and was granted a stay of execution, and Packer's appeal would be taken up at a future term of the Supreme Court. He called Sheriff Smith of Lake City, telling him the news, and warning that if anything happened to Packer, he would spend the next 10 years of his life and all his money to find out and punish the perps. I mean, he was pretty dedicated, I guess, to that. I mean, at least threatening-wise. And I'm sure no one is surprised that he had a good reason to worry, as there was an organized plan already in place to break Packer from jail and lynch him, according to the Gunnison Review paper.
And lynch him?
Yeah. They wanted to kill him.
Okay.
In fact, one paper, the Leadville Herald-Democrat, actually urged readers to rectify the egregious blundering of Colorado's legislative lawmakers, saying that it cost the county over $4,000 to convict Packer, and the Supreme Court was now saying he couldn't be punished because of the thick-headed legislature of 1881, who had repealed that old murder law without instating a new one. The Silver World even insisted that Sheriff Smith would love to see Packer swinging from the scaffold of the Ocean Wave Bridge, but he was duty-bound to protect him, and so he was spirited away in the middle of the night to safety in Gunnison, 55 miles away, to await his appeal, after which the papers began calling him the unhung fiend. And I bet he wasn't thrilled by that, considering he wanted to be known as quite a hung fiend.
Oh my God, Ashley. Jesus Christ.
A popular paper at the time, the National Police Gazette, was heavy on horror and gore and loved to print salacious headlines on the topic. On March 31st, 1883, just before Packer's trial, they published a prominent story on his case with the headline, "A Man-Eater, Lurid Romance of the Wilderness and its Ghastly Sequel. A party of gold seekers assassinated and eaten by their guide, who confessed the crime." They were reporting based off of a dispatch from Denver and said in their article that after 9 years, one of the greatest murder mysteries of the frontier was cleared up with the capture of the murderer. They called Packer Packa for some reason.
Why?
I don't know.
What does that mean?
Packa. Maybe they just were, maybe it's like spelling phonetically because nobody was that great at being literate back then. I don't know.
That great at being.
I mean, maybe that's why his sister and him spelled their names weird, you know?
Wrong, yeah. Or...
Yeah. Okay. And accompanying the article was a portrait of him that was based off of a souvenir that the Lake City World Herald had previously offered for sale. They were like selling these little game cards with Packer's face on them. It's like, you can't make money off of your murders, but we can.
We can. Capitalism, baby.
Yeah. And guess who happened across this article 20 years after he'd last seen him? Packer's long-lost father.
Oh, my goodness.
Who, it was said, was greatly agitated at the news of the article, to say the least. But at least now his family finally knew what had happened to him, and I'm sure they were mighty proud.
Okay.
His sister wrote him in jail, which he initially denied that it was his sister for some reason, and then finally admitted it.
Why does he lie about the most inane things?
I have no idea. I mean, I guess he's a compulsive liar. Like, he obviously has some stuff going on here. He burned the letter having no... It's probably lead poisoning. He burned the... Why does every parent that I know gaslight their children about stuff that they did whenever they were younger?
Sure, yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
like, maybe this is all tied together. He burned the letter having no interest in responding, but she tried a few more times to talk to her estranged cannibal brother. Packer ignored them countless times until finally responding with what was called one of the most depraved letters that anyone has ever seen, wherein he accused her of abandoning him and threatened to kill her when he was released.
Why?
I don't know why he was so
weird.
angry. She wasn't alone. she wasn't alone in being on the receiving end of his threats. While in jail in Gunnison, Packer repeatedly threatened to kill any witnesses that had testified against him, along with Judge Jerry, though I don't really blame him on that one.
Well, I mean, that's the judge who...
And he's a dick.
Yeah.
A bloviating dick. So Sheriff Shores, who was in charge of him in Gunnison, called Packer the only prisoner held in his custody in the 8 years that he'd been in that job that he failed to find any good qualities about.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
He said he was slow-witted, a coward, vicious, and a natural bully who seemed to want to dominate other prisoners. Weird. And it's funny because Sheriff Shores' wife spent a lot of time with him and did not have the same opinion of him. She said that he was nice, like totally fine, but he did seem to want to be like the head prisoner in the prison yard.
Well, I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that she's a woman.
Maybe.
You know?
Yeah, maybe. Because it did seem like every man hated his guts.
Sure.
Except for Bob McGrew. Or whatever his name was. Colorado's first poet laureate, Alice Polk Hill, visited Packer in jail numerous times and eventually released a book, Tales of the Colorado Pioneers, that ended up a bestseller. 2 chapters in that book were dedicated to Packer, who she referred to as the Great American Anthropophagian.
Whoa, Anthropophagian?
How do you
Prophagian? What?
The Great American Anthropophagian. Or, if she had any interest in not coming across as an elitist idiot, a cannibal. That's what she's trying to say.
Oh, I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's the technical term for
that was so
cannibalism.
much.
I know.
I said it earlier.
But still,
that's a
bit
lot.
Much. Yeah, take it down. Hill found Packer to be visually, obviously a criminal, saying anyone possessing any knowledge at all of human nature would say he naturally belonged to the criminal class. Again, I kind of think this lady needs to take her shit down about 75%. Although Hill concluded her chapters on Packer saying that if set free, the citizens wouldn't allow him to live another day, they did just that, and he was able to await his second trial without being lynched by some crazy frontierman mob.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Good job, guys. In October of 1885, the Supreme Court finally handed down its decision, citing the Garvey case as a precedent, which was the one that had been previously dismissed because of that whole situation where they got rid of that old murder law. And Chief Justice Beck ruled that the judgment in Packer's case must be reversed. Packer's lawyer, Himes, attempted to persuade the Supreme Court that since Packer had already been tried under the principle of double jeopardy, he could not be tried again, but the court rejected that, as they said that there was no law to convict him, and so he truly wasn't even on trial in his first trial.
I mean, again, technically true.
Yeah. So he was never actually in jeopardy on account of his crime,
my gosh.
and so he could still be tried again, denying the motion to set him free. It's complicated.
That's hard. That's hard to swallow.
For some reason, no one has ever been able to explain. It was another full year before Packer would get his second trial, this time for a lesser charge of manslaughter. His new lawyer, his former attorney's one-time partner, Thomas C. Brown, petitioned to get the trial moved to a different city as the citizens of Hinsdale County, including Judge Jerry, were exposed to biased reporting for years regarding Packer and could not be unbiased in their decisions.
That's fair.
Yes. Jerry, surprisingly, granted the transfer to Gunnison County, and a new judge, William Harrison, was to preside over the trial. Following a 4-month delay, he was finally arraigned July 31st, 1886, being charged with the manslaughter of Israel Swan, Shannon Wilson Bell, James Humphrey, Frank Miller, and George Noon. He entered a plea of not guilty, and his trial was set to begin a mere 2 days later, which was, I know, like lightning speed, considering how long it took to get to that point.
That's what I'm saying. What the
nuts.
What?
It's so weird. The proceedings continued in that vein, as the jury was selected and sworn in by late morning of day 1.
Jesus.
And the first witness that day was yet again Preston Nutter.
Oh my God.
His testimony was essentially the same this time around, except for a few damning details clearly meant to discredit Packer's story, such as the fact that there was no way that the men had been driven mad by starvation, as there was plenty of wild game in the area, and Packer himself was an experienced trapper.
Okay.
He also mentioned he found the shoulder bone of a deer at the men's camp, which obviously makes it pretty clear that they had food, especially protein, if it's true.
If that's true.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, obviously. On day 2 of the proceedings, the prosecution rested its case. Then shortly after 11 a.m., I know, it's like, done.
Oh my God, it took a year to get there. And they're like, okay, we're done.
This is like 11 years later.
That's crazy.
Then shortly after 11 a.m., Packer was called to the stand for the defense. The years in jail had taken a toll on him, and he looked pale, his face hollow, his eyes sunken. True to character, he delivered a wild and rambling 2-hour statement, which was then followed up with the prosecution, particularly D.A. Mills, grilling him to the point that Packer was so unsettled that he exploded in rage numerous times. His own attorney even attempted to calm him down at one point, and he turned to him and shouted, "You shut up! I'm on the stand now."
Oh. Oh.
And at another point, he became so violent that Sheriff Shores had to physically subdue him. The New York Times described him as the most remarkable witness that was ever placed on the stand in this country. He would abide by no rule. He proved incorrigible, inconsistent, irrepressible, and violent.
That was good alliteration. Violent.
It was good. While his outbursts may have slimly, possibly, very slimly possibly, been the indignation of an innocent man to those in attendance, it just confirmed what they already believed about him. He was every bit the demon that they believed him to be. Closing arguments began on Wednesday, August 4th, and 4 hours were allotted to both the prosecution and defense, and at 4 p.m., the jury retired for deliberations. Packer was sure he was going to be hung. The jury needed just 2.5 hours to reach a unanimous decision. They were convinced by all the witnesses' testimony that Packer had misled the party so that he could murder them in their sleep with the sole motive of robbery, and they completely discounted his claim that they had been starving to death, as a few of the jurors were also experienced in the area, and they said game was not scarce. Their verdict was that Packer was guilty of voluntary manslaughter in all 5 cases. The following day, he was sentenced to a continuous term of 40 years, 5 consecutive terms of 8 years for each victim. At the time, it was the longest term ever imposed by an American judge, and still, many felt it was inadequate.
40 years?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even 40 yet.
That's a long time.
That's a long fucking time.
Especially back then.
Yes.
As Packer wasted away in prison, his once sparse epileptic seizures grew incredibly common.
Sparse isn't...
Epileptic. Have you ever seen Flight of the Conchords?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. But I have watched What We Do in the Shadows, which is incredible.
So
I watched the TV series. I did not watch the movie. Oh. You should watch the TV series.
Okay,
have you seen it?
I will, but
I will, but the movie series, and I will. You don't even know. You haven't seen it.
No, Jermaine Clement is on it.
You haven't seen it.
That's all you need to know.
You haven't seen it.
Jermaine Clement.
Oh, I'm gonna kill
and
everybody.
Okay.
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 We'll cut that whole thing.
It was thought he may be better off recovering at the state asylum due to these seizures. This, however, was eventually found to not be the case, as it was determined that his epilepsy had not rendered him so weak of mind as to be classified insane, and so he was to remain in prison.
But here's the thing. His once sparse epileptic seizures was once every 2 days.
Yeah.
That's not that sparse, if we're being honest.
And on top of those, he had gotten lead poisoning multiple times, and then perhaps was starving. So it's like there's
so many moving parts to this whole situation.
Yeah. In July of 1894, Packer applied for a pardon, which was spearheaded by his longtime friend Dwayne Hatch, 20 years having passed since his alleged crimes, but he was denied. He attempted a few more times before the final appeal that was made in 1899, which also caught the attention of Polly Pry, a reporter for the Denver Post, who joined in the efforts to get Packer paroled, which he finally got in February of 1901. Pry's reporting changed the hearts and minds of many in the community on Packer, and after he was paroled, he worked as a guard for the Denver Post, a job many believed was given to him through Pry, and later as a ranch hand. Packer obviously held Pry to high esteem, calling her his liberator. And on his deathbed in 1907, he wrote his final message. It said, "I am dying and I am innocent of the crime. I wish to meet my Maker without a shadow hanging over me, and so I ask that I be given an unconditional pardon for the crime of which I am convicted. I have asked nothing in the past, except for all his demands, but I want to die clear in the opinion of my fellow men." One word. This letter was sent to the State Board of Pardons, but no action was ever taken due to the fact that Packer died April 23rd, weeks before the letter ever reached them. He was buried the following day on a little knoll in the Littleton Cemetery in Colorado, and that is where we end the story of the man-eater. Did Packer eat his friends?
Probably.
Did he kill them first to eat them?
Did he like premeditate?
Yeah.
Like, did he? No, probably not.
I just don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so because I think what he really wanted was to chase riches, like most people during that time wanted, and
or no, you know,
or now.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think I don't think so. I think it just happened that people are so foolhardy and their egos are so much bigger than what logic is that he was like, you know what? I know this man is telling me that he knows the land better than anybody else, but I'm still going to try.
yeah.
And that ended up to be their folly. And he was just the one that was like, you know what? Fuck it.
I'm
just eating ya.
I'm gonna eat this guy's leg. Though, you know, how did he end up being the only survivor of the group?
Sure.
That's
yeah.
another
It's
aspect
another
of
weird
the
thing.
situation that's like, well, I don't know. But I mean, if Bell did in fact kill everyone and he killed Bell, then what did he have to lose by eating them?
True.
Other than becoming a cannibal and ruining his whole life.
Sure.
Hi, ladies.
Hello, ladies.
Hello, ladies.
You both look beautiful,
Oh,
and it's lovely to see you
Yes,
as always.
It is very lovely to see you guys too.
Absolutely.
We watched the movie of the event that you guys researched. Agreed.
Absolutely.
We're the worst.
Yeah, really. I hate a lot more humans than I hate monsters. I'll tell you that.
Oh, girl, 100.
That's also one of my favorite parts of your podcast is just the very strong opinions against like the assholes, because I feel like that's very similar to us. We're like, this motherfucker.
We definitely don't hold back on our feelings.
And I love it.
Yeah.
I'm
It's the
very here
best.
for it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do love though is that like, so Kim and I are kind of part of our premise is like our lack of research. Like the whole point is that we need to know like
Zero.
nothing
Little,
about
sure.
the topic going into it.
Right.
And then you guys are the complete opposite.
Very good.
So when we decided to embark upon this little partnership, we let you guys choose the event based on sort of like what you guys wanted to research.
Yeah.
So how did you guys decide on this one?
Well, I think we're like drawn to cannibals somehow without even meaning to be.
It's been a weird
is
thing
it?
this like month. We've been like cannibals, hatchets, like everything.
And it's so funny because when I was listening to you guys about it, y'all went sexual with it on a number of occasions, and I was like, I feel the same way. I
couldn't help it.
It's hard to. It's like I don't know why eating other humans turns into such a sexy endeavor. It seems when it's
so intimate.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the exchange of fluids,
Oh, yeah.
the bringing one body into another. Oof. I'm sorry. I'm getting this is
I think it's that
very
time of
appropriate.
year. Yeah, just about everything is getting me hot to trot.
There you go. I mean,
That time of year.
it is.
What did you
Spooky
call
season.
it? Yeah, what did you call it?
Cuffing season.
Cuffing season.
Cuffing season.
Cuffing
Oh, it
season.
is cuffing season.
I love that. I love
We
that.
don't really have that in LA because it's just,
Always the same.
yeah.
It's always, hey, stranger.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always,
Pretty much.
oh, I'm a Peter Pan boy, so I don't actually want to commit anyway.
Ugh.
even for half the year.
Yeah. Yeah. We're a very Peter. We have a lot of Peter Pans out here.
And then we're crossing over with Kim and Ket Stay Alive, maybe, who they're a horror movie podcast, and they play a little game during each one of their episodes. They're a ton of fun to listen to. It's kind of like us, but a
Maybe
horror
le-
movie podcast.
Yeah, maybe just like less angry
Yeah, definitely.
sometimes.
I don't know.
maybe.
Ket gets pretty angry.
Yeah.
Definitely less
Yeah.
angry.
I get pretty angry, but I think we were clever enough to couch it in comedy.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
My actual rage, people are like, "You're so funny," and I'm like, "No, I really want to kill you."
Exactly. We get jokes of our rage.
I felt you
Yeah.
so hard on the spiral episode where you're like, communication would have solve this whole thing.
Yes. Literally, the movie is over in like 4 minutes if we just communicated with each other.
That's a lot of. I think that's a lot of every problem in life, to be honest with you.
100%. Yeah. So we're so excited to be on with you guys. I feel like the four of us make a nice little team. We all bring different things to the table.
Yeah, I
absolutely.
totally love it. I think this is definitely the beginning of a beautiful situation.
Could not agree more.
Yeah.
I could not agree more.
Well,
So that was that. And, and
there we go.
that was our movie. Hopefully you went to listen to Creep It Real. So now we're going to talk about it together.
Yay!
So when I watched the movie, I was like, this shit is bananas.
Yes.
And I was like, I cannot wait to hear the true crime tale of this. And then when I started listening to yours, I was like, oh, ours was like, I almost felt bad. I was like, ours was much more fun.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yours
It
like
was more
started
interesting.
just with like racism and just like just all of the worst fucking things. And I was like,
yeah.
oh gosh.
I got it.
Poor girls.
Kim and I are over here going, hot dudes are eating each other. Woo!
I wish. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I would have thought about my show premise a little harder than I have. But yes,
That's what alcohol's for.
True.
But the hot guys eating each other part. I mean, that's what everybody looks for in life, right? I mean,
Honestly.
right. So
Yeah.
You definitely got the good end of the stick on this one. We just got some weirdos, maybe lying.
For sure. So here's my question. So we listen to yours, you listen to ours. It's obviously a very, very different. It was very Hollywoodized.
Very.
Oh, was it with the Wendigo? Okay.
All the twists and turns. All the twists
Yes.
and turns. Yes.
But were there any points in our telling of the movie? Because obviously it's slightly different than like watching it because you're, hearing it like fourth hand, I guess. Was there anything that stood out to you guys that was like, oh, wow, this is like very close to what happened, or wow, I don't know why they changed this part of the story, or just any reactions in comparison to the movie and the story?
So I think literally the only part where he's talking about the fact that he goes and looks for firewood and comes back and sees somebody eating other members of the camp.
Mm-hmm.
That's
The only
thing.
six
That's
people,
the only similarity.
6 people, and that's
I
it.
completely agree. Yeah, like I was
that.
so it's just one man who ate 6 people, and that exact part was the only thing that was similar because it wasn't even technically the same time.
No, I noticed that
like,
too.
because this was
No, it
the
kind
movie
of
was like
was.
1840. It was like still
Oh.
1800s, but this was like 1847, and it was like the Mexican American.
Yeah.
war.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
true.
know why they would have changed that, but they
And
did.
what was the real time?
1890s?
1860.
A little bit later.
What? For Civil War. It was Civil War.
I've already forgotten, you guys.
Yeah,
But that's
I remember
interesting
just
because
being later, like definitely
It was
not
later.
that time. So I was like, wow, it's interesting. They like pushed it back. They like clearly didn't want it to make it the Civil War
And I wondered,
purpose.
Yeah.
why wouldn't they
which is
just keep his
interesting.
name even? They didn't even take his name or anything. It
Nothing.
was very
Yeah. Well,
interesting.
he also seemed like a way different dude in the movie
Yes.
because in real life he seemed like kind of dumb.
Yes, 100%.
And,
and
like
like mentally ill,
Yes.
as opposed to like our dude
was like
seemed
malicious,
maniacal and malicious.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
it didn't start out that way. Like he was just kind of.
Well, I think it's just sexier that way, you know?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we? Okay, so I sent all the girls a little clip from the movie because none of them have seen it besides me. So I want them all to watch it right now to get a reaction.
Okay, let's.
Okay.
I was
Hold on, I
gonna
have to download
see
it.
if it was what's the word? If it was like scandalous the way I felt about it, but we've pretty much already confirmed it's not. But I really want you to see the specific part.
Okay.
So the video is of the main cannibal guy, who in the movie is like Calhoun / Colonel Ives.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
I knew that this was the guy y'all were talking.
Sir.
Oh my god, that is the
most sexual licking of of 2 fingers that you could ever see.
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm into cannibals now.
That was like literally you were like, it's really sexy, but like the thing you didn't describe was like there was like a realism to it, and I was just like, are we having sex right now? Like, am I currently having sex right now?
Very steamy.
Yes.
But, like,
Yeah,
He really
he's already
sucked
done
on
so
those
much by
fingers.
that point. So like, it's uncomfortable because I'm like, I'm so attracted to this man who's the worst person I can imagine.
that was so okay.
Oh, yeah.
That brings me to a point that I found really interesting in the character differences and the message of the movie versus like what was actually going on. So like this was like super sexy. Like this was like a vampire type thing where there's like a sexualization to like the vampiric myth. And like Ives in the movie was like, okay, I ate people for survival, but then there's this like added magic element where like I'm no longer eating for survival. I'm eating because it makes me like extremely virile and heal faster, and I'm into it. Like I'm like turned on by it. I'm into it. What I found interesting with Alfred Packer was that if I am in the wilderness and I'm going bananas and I'm frostbitten and life just sucks and I eat 6 people, I kind of feel like on the outside when you get back into society, it's like, no, I get a do-over. Like that didn't count.
No.
Like I can't be expected to answer for my actions when I was like so deprived of that which makes me live.
Exactly.
Like I just didn't, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely.
It was
I don't
very-
know. Go ahead.
No.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
Okay, it was very strange the way everybody vilified him for so harshly for something that was like, well, if you were starving out there and people were dead, why not eat them? They're just going to be decaying anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to be traumatizing, probably.
Totally.
You know,
and like I just
100%.
feel like that's definitely, maybe they didn't even have this. I mean, obviously, because you guys talked about how we have a lot of laws in place now that like this never would have happened today, because it's like
Those
whole-
weird murder, non-murder laws were bonkers.
Yeah.
What the fuck was that?
but also just that like they could just like publish shit
Yeah.
about people and then expect them to be tried in the same place. Like
It was ridiculous.
all that kind of stuff was like super weird. But like I feel nowadays it would be like, everybody, we can all agree that he was like temporarily insane, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yes. Cool. Okay, great.
For
Moving on.
sure. I would definitely. Yeah, it was weird. They really didn't bring that much of that up. Like, you know, where it was like, wait a second, there were circumstances here that were extenuating.
Yeah.
This. Yeah, it was definitely.
I
strange.
mean, do you think it was because like he was a little bit of a cuckoo banana before?
yeah.
Like he wasn't
Yeah, that's a good
like
point.
he kind of already.
I mean,
So people like already had an opinion of him.
yeah,
I think so. Yeah, for sure. It's not something that any one of us have ever been in the middle of where we can say, oh, I was starving one day with a bunch of people and I didn't eat people.
Right.
Like,
It happens.
how
It
can-
happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing, I mean, my husband told me this makes me very creepy. It's fine. I'm working through it. To me, it's like killing someone in self-defense, where it's like you can go in a court of law and be like, it was self-defense. And then that's a whole new conversation. To me, this is similar, where it's like, I was very hungry. There was no other food.
Yeah.
I'm going to eat this human. But there's this weird thing that happens with cannibalism where like somehow this is like the worst type of murder. And I'm just like, no, it's just murder.
murder.
Like,
I mean,
I'd-
it's pretty bad, Kat. Like, it's pretty
But it's
fucking
like-
bad.
But I'm saying like I would have just as much of an issue like killing an animal as I would a
But
human
this is
to
like
eat them.
bad even within the animal kingdom. Like they don't eat their own kind normally. Most animals, you know what I mean?
Some mommies eat their babies
But
if they're
that's
too
like a
weak.
specific thing and a specific kind of like I don't know. Like most animals don't eat themselves; they eat other people.
most animals.
Like, I'm just saying, I think it's a grayer area.
It should be.
I think the survival thing for sure, but like
Yeah.
I could see why, especially back in like the 1800s, that they're like, he ate people though.
And he's gonna eat all of us if we don't watch out.
Exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah.
bet that was a huge part of it.
I
was
think
like
so.
the fear.
Yeah,
Of
and
it.
he was
Of like,
he was abrasive
Go ahead.
too. So it's like, you know, I think that added to people thinking he was gonna always attack him at any moment.
Right.
yeah, that's true.
So, do you guys like not think that there was any like validity to like him kind of like wanting to do it for the money or anything? Like, you think it was like straight
I don't think
survival?
he wanted to do it for the money.
Yeah.
I truly don't know, to be
I
honest.
made $70 off of their bodies. Like,
Well, I don't know. That's what he claimed he got off their bodies, but then he did go on that spending spree in town where he was, you know, getting sex and gambling. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I
and
think it was
horses.
more of a like ego and like trying to figure himself out, like trying to continue to survive type of thing. I don't think it was. I don't think it was a money thing. To me, it wasn't.
Or was it more like those cakes that you get at Mardi Gras where it's like, ooh, I'm eating this cake and it's delicious. And ooh,
king
there's
cake.
like a little prize inside.
right, like it was
And
the
you're just
after
like,
effect.
This is just like
Yeah.
an added bonus. Like I ate this dude and oh, look, there's a
He's
prize
got
in his
money.
pocket.
And I get to buy a horse with the money that's in his pocket.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like, what are you going to do? Like not take the prize? Like that would be weird.
Yeah, it would be weirder. But that's what I thought was strange when he said, I left a bunch of money just laying on the ground. And it's like,
Yeah,
no,
that's weird.
You didn't.
You did not do that.
Yeah, your lies are making me question.
That's
everything
worse than
else.
eating people. Let's be real. Stop it.
Yeah.
So, I guess this is like he's the only person that knows this, right? But it's like, so how did those people actually die? Because it's like they die and then you eat them, or like you murder them. And eat
Did you
them?
murder them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But,
you
like,
know, it's possible.
only his story, right?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. That's
Yeah.
kind of like the Donner Party, where they didn't necessarily have to eat the rest of the party. You know, do you know what I'm talking about? Like
Oh.
Ashley?
Yeah.
He didn't necessarily have to eat the remainder of the party.
Right.
It just became the easier way to
It was there.
survive.
Yeah, it was there, so why not eat it? Yeah.
Right. I mean, once you pop, you can't stop.
It's like a Pringle.
It's got to be addictive, according to It's Always Sunny.
Yeah.
That's what I always
Yeah.
recommend.
Yes.
I am so glad you guys referenced that Always Sunny episode because literally as you guys are talking, I was like, this is like the Always Sunny episode. I hope they mentioned the Always Sunny episode.
I always think about that episode. It makes me cringe so much.
It's so funny.
It is. Oh my goodness. But
The
yeah.
best.
What was the shining moment of the movie for you guys? Was it the sexy blood licking or
Yeah, I was going to say, do you mean other than the time that we
that.
all just had sex with the same man?
with the guy who played Rumpelstiltskin on TV, I think.
Yes. That's how I know him. I mean, for me, like in the movie, at least, like I thought the twist was really good. And Ketrin even said this, like she was like very quickly on, she's like, I got this fucking figured out.
Yeah.
I know what's happening. And then there's like twist number 1 where she was like, didn't see it going there. And then there's like the big twist where you're like, oh shit. Like I just wasn't expecting it. So I did think it was like well made in that way, just like as a film.
Yeah.
Of like him being Calhoun, because it's like first he's Calhoun and then you realize he's actually the cannibal, but then when he's actually Colonel Ives, it's just like holy fucking shitballs.
Yeah. And then you realize that at the beginning he said like, it's good you don't know Colonel Ives because he's a
Exactly.
despicable person.
Ah.
And you're like, you're a despicable person.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense that it was made by or written by the lady that did. Is that the lady that did Ocean's 11? Is that what you said, or the guy? Was it
The guy who wrote Ocean's 11, yeah.
Okay, I thought it was a lady in my head for some reason.
The director was a lady.
Director. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So I can kind of see that with all the twists and turns.
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, all of the characters were really great. Like the actors were really good in it. They were all very defined characters, which was like fun, you know.
I really want to watch
horror
it now.
comedy western.
I
I honestly, I recommend it. It was fun to watch. Like I was like, this is bonkers. Like you kind of have to like let it be that, you know. Like once you like sometimes we watch a horror movie and it's like very straight, you know what I mean? So if you're expecting that and then get this, you're like, what the actual fuck? Yeah. But when you like are like, okay, this is its own thing, then it's great. I liked it.
I'm really glad because I was a little worried that y'all were gonna hate this one.
Well, I think what also is fun about one of the many things I've come to love about our podcast is like, even if the movie that I'm watching is bad, it is never going to be not fun to tell the movie to Kim.
Yeah.
So like, it kind of doesn't matter if the movie is shitty.
100%.
That just is more fodder for conversation, which is delightful
100%.
because it just means that like there's a pot of gold at the end of the shitty movie rainbow.
That's so true.
Speaking of ladies, I would like to give a toast to Martha, the character, because she was my favorite character
She won
in the
movie.
world.
She won.
She did. And like her thing of like, just like, all you white assholes can just fucking kiss my ass. Goodbye. And she just pieced out. She just left.
My
She just,
favorite
like-
thing that you were was that you were like, I would close the fucking door and peace out. And then her thing that she did was she closed the fucking door and she peaced the fuck out.
and peaced out.
Exactly that.
It was so awesome.
And it was fucking brilliant. I was like, yes, queen.
Yes.
Get the fuck out of here with these fucking
reminded me of
idiots.
that SpongeBob meme that's like him being like, all right, I'm gonna go.
I'm out.
It's great.
I guess in that way that the movie also reminded me of the actual story, in that it seemed like there was actually secretly a bunch of them that were pieces of shit, kind of, you know? They all kind of like easily gave way to the, well, I guess, I don't know if you're a piece of shit if you're starving and you eat human meat. Like we said, it's kind of a gray area.
It really is.
I also just like don't know in your story. And tell me if there's like an obvious detail that I missed that would refute this. But like, I don't know that we can say that Alfred is the only one who ate people.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
100%.
He seems like the last one standing, but
Well-
there's not really any way to say that they weren't all eating each other.
Yeah.
That's very true. But like also what I find the most interesting, like how you end up as the last man standing.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's why it's like comes down to the wire of like, so everyone just died naturally except you?
Right.
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 Or, you know what I mean? Or does there end up being a showdown at some point?
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
is also, I guess, survival. I don't know. I mean,
I thought you were gonna say Survivor, like the TV show, and I was like, yes, it is like that, like that. But that makes sense where it's just like there's maybe alliances where it's like you get this leg and I get the other leg, but we have to kill him, and then it's like just the two of us staring at each other, and it's like who's gonna make it? Kim and I decided that we would just slowly feed off of each other.
Oh,
Yeah, little
that's
bits
sweet.
of yourselves.
That's very sweet. I'm not gonna offer myself up so easily.
I wouldn't either. So I don't know.
I was thinking that's kind of the same way that people become politicians, as they just turn.
They eat each other?
They slowly but surely, just give up all convictions and eat each other.
Yeah.
There we go.
You know?
Very
Yeah.
true.
And then you're running for president.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, our president
That's
has
if you had
eaten
any
a lot of
convictions
people.
to begin with.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, totally.
Very true.
And a lot of pizza as well, because it kind of sounded for a second like he said pizza. And I was like, true. Probably a lot of pizza. Okay. All right.
So when you guys were talking about the most frightening part being like the children, like outside of your door, I really did feel that with you. Do you remember that when you were talking about?
Which part was that?
Like it was.
Oh, it was actually in real life.
Oh no, it was in real life.
Oh, when someone knocked on the door?
You're
I
like,
was
there's
like,
children
oh, no,
outside.
I feel that. I feel that on a personal and spiritual level.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'm going to keep that in then. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're having your best friend like tell you a horror movie and she already looks like she's in the movie host. So like I'm already creeped out by that. And then I just see like a ghost child walk past my window.
Oh, no.
I'm like, I'm not currently equipped for this. Like I don't have the mental bandwidth to process
I
this.
forgot
No
about
children.
that. I was like, there was a lot of different scares that we had.
That was from the last episode because you just posted on Instagram as like a
my brain's
story.
broken. I don't know. I guess
and
I
it's-
need some more human meat to get my brain back.
That's probably the key for all of us. We're like,
Yeah.
I'm fucking exhausted. I'm depressed. I have seasonal.
Yeah.
I need something. It's human meat. Is
Yeah,
basically.
we just need to find humans to eat.
I do wonder, like, if I just wish he could have been more honest because everyone hated on him so much. Because then I'm just like, tell us all about it. Like,
How does it? Yeah. How does it?
how
go?
did you feel? Do you want more?
Yeah.
You know, are you interested in more? Like, I wonder if he secretly continued eating meat or humans and meat in his life.
I feel like it creates a hunger. I mean, I can't help but think deep inside of you, you're like, I'm always needing that human meat.
I know. I just want to like.
Interesting.
This is making me realize, Kim. I think you're right. I would like to speak definitively to a cannibal and be like, no judgment here, bro. Like, I just want to know about your inner life, like your inner emotional life as a cannibal.
I might judge
You
you
know?
a little, but
Yeah.
tell me the truth.
A little.
Colonel Ives was into it.
Yeah.
But Guy Pearce was like, no, thank you, my morals. And he tasted
Right.
it. He tasted it too. Like he had the flesh.
He did.
And so I guess maybe it just comes down to your morals at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
And I-
fucked.
I think Ashley and I are going to be like, bring me a leg.
Give me that muscly meat. I
Yeah.
want a big, strong leg wrapped around me and life and food.
Yeah, there you go. Me too.
There you
great.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
I will say, like, I don't even eat meat, human or
You're a
animal.
vegetarian.
I'm a vegetarian.
Wow.
Yeah. But when Kim was describing that human stew, I was like, I mean, that sounds delicious. Like it just sounds, she just described the stew really well.
Oh my God.
And I haven't craved a stew for many years since I stopped eating meat. And the first one I craved was that of human.
Kim.
So
you have a new job. Describe
I'm
food.
I'm a little concerned.
I am
I love
unemployed.
Yeah.
I guess
I
though,
mean-
if you're a vegetarian, it's possible that humans like are almost better options than animals because you're doing that probably for a reason.
That's how Ketchup feels about it.
Thank
exactly
you,
how Ketchup
Ashley.
feels.
That is my actual thought. I'm like, I would have an easier time eating humans than
Guilty.
I would animals.
Yes.
Because here's the thing. There is no such thing as a shitty animal. Animals aren't
True.
assholes.
Yeah.
They're never assholes. It's not possible. Humans, on the other hand, there's a few I could take out.
When you said that, I was like, I always talk about like, and I don't know if I should ever, I say it all the time publicly, I probably shouldn't, but I'm like, I could really be somebody that just secretly assassinates terrible people.
Girl, high
I'm
five.
like, hey, where's my camera?
Yeah,
but
you
yeah,
guys would
so
make a great
we could,
team.
we could team up. We'll never get
Yeah.
caught. It'll be
Yeah.
amazing. It'll be
Here's-
amazing.
Here's a dynamic I'm noticing right now. So Ashley and I are the wild cards that need to be kept in check by our partners. So
Yes.
I've married two people, my husband and Kim, both of whom remind
Not really.
me that like
wifey.
that I should have morals, like that I should,
I thought
not
you
be a
meant you've been
terrible
married
person.
twice. I was like, me too. Okay, well,
No, I just think it's unfair to not count Kim among my important
agreed.
relationships in my life.
Yes.
But it sounds like Bianca is the mitigating force in Ashley's life. Is that an accurate assessment? No. No, you both are just going hog wild.
I'm going hog wild pretty much
It depends.
always.
It depends which one of us needs it. Like, there are times where I go fucking nuts because I'm a ball of anxiety. And there are times where Ashley goes nuts. So we kind of flip-flop that role, I think.
But I'm at a pretty constant, like, horn dog, like, I talk about, I'm constantly just being terrible in that way where she's like, oh, okay. Or talking about just whatever wild shit I'm thinking in my head. Yeah. And that way, I
guess that's true. Yeah.
In that way, I think she does do that for sure. So, yeah. I would agree with you on that assessment.
Well, great. We all have to find our counterbalance.
Yes.
True.
Agreed.
Well, cool. Should we close out our respective segments?
I guess
here?
so. It's kind of sad, but I guess we can.
I know.
It is tragic.
Tragic. Oh, my goodness. Very
But
dramatic.
now we're all united in our love for cannibals.
Yeah.
And,
I know.
And our sexy times that we've had with them.
Yeah, I love it. We should outside of recording an episode, we should have a little happy hour where we just get to talk to each other like friends.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It would be.
This was so much fun. We loved collabing with you guys, and hopefully we could do it again.
Absolutely
Let's
doing
do
it
it
again. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. We loved it. We
Absolutely.
are super
So
excited
much
to
fun.
put it out too.
Yeah.
Us too.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Cool.
What do you think, everybody? Do you think Alfred Packer killed these men and ate them on purpose, or did he happen to eat them after they ended up dead? What is your opinion? Let us know.
You can go over to creepitrealpod.com and you can actually, send us your opinion. We've gotten a couple of opinions sent over to us.
Yes. We also received the nicest email today. It was so sweet from Helen.
Yes, from
Helen in the UK.
In the UK.
Who doesn't have social media. And shout out, Helen. We heard you loud and clear. Thank you so much. We love you.
You're beautiful.
You're absolutely beautiful. Also, can I just say, I know I already said it, but I just want to tell all of our delightful listeners that sent us stories for our listener stories episode, you literally made my whole week. This is a hard week. It's a real rough one. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of work to get done, but it was the most shining, glowing moment of my entire week. Listening to those stories, I literally was brought to tears by how happy I was by you guys just being so amazing. I just freaking love you.
Yeah, you guys did a really incredible job.
And you all sounded so fucking good.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Can we talk about Brian for a second? Hi, Brian. Yeah, you sounded like Matthew McConaughey, which somebody said on our Instagram, and I was like, yeah, he did.
Take it down 75% there.
We should cut that. But
I don't know.
Great job,
I'm sure
everybody.
I'm sure you would love. I mean, I just love you guys so much. I just love you. I truly do. And if you really want to join our family, our Patreon family, go over to creepitrealpod.com and take the link over to Patreon, right? And you can join us.
Sure,
the family.
Yeah.
You get free stuff, and you get episodes, and you get all sorts of stuff.
And you get a discount on the merch and the amount that you're donating, which is a pretty big,
serious amount.
Yeah, it's a big hefty sum.
And again, just to remind you, we are having our Halloween party on Halloween night, yes. October 31st. Yes. Join us. We'll talk about it more.
Also, if you don't want to go over and join the Patreon, we totally understand.
If you can't,
if you can't, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Ashley totally gets it. Mm-hmm. But if you would like to support us in a different manner, please feel free to head on over to iTunes.com and leave us a 5-star written review. Or head on over to Spotify, if that's where you listen to us most, and just hit that follow button. And you will get all of our newest episodes.
Yeah. And you know what you could also do is just share us with people.
Or share us with people. Yeah. Share us with your friends and family like Helen does. Helen's I tell everybody about you. And that's incredible.
Thank you so much. That's that truly is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
But we also like you to join our family so that we can get to know you a little bit more personally.
Yes.
So, okay. Have a great life.
Have a great everything.
Be for real.